ENV8, the water environment, and PPS2, natural heritage, River Faughan is located on the eastern boundary and separated from the site by a sheet pile flood defence wall. Consideration has been given by officers as to the impacts of the unauthorised preparatory works which took place on site in advance of a decision being taken on the application, and consideration also as to how impacts from the proposed construction works with appropriate mitigation will not impact on water quality of River Faughan. Officers are concerned that due to the lack of information in the environmental statement regarding the flood event in 2017, that it has not been demonstrated that there was no pollution impact on River Faughan SAC ASSI, and the proposal therefore fails to comply with ENV8 of the Dare Area Plan and PPS2. So in considering the environmental statement assessment and recent conclusions, Section 12 in Members' Report sets out the submitted environmental assessment and addenda, including an assessment of the baseline evidence prior to the unauthorised works taking place on site, and considers all the further environmental information submitted in support of the application, which also assess the impacts from infilling, the structural stability of the sheet pile flood defence, and the proposed wastewater pumping station. The environmental statement and addenda assesses the impacts on land, soil and groundwater, human health, surface water, noise, air and dust. The baseline evidence submitted in July 2020 considers the likely significant effects that are relevant to the baseline and preliminary site works and scopes out those aspects where no environmental effects were likely to occur. The works that took place on site consisted of the breaking up and stockpiling of hard standing on site and the importation of clean soil as fill material. The breaking up of concrete floor plates started on the 1st of June 2017, lasting approximately 9 weeks, ending on the 1st of August 2017. The crushing of concrete rubble was undertaken over 5 periods between the 2nd of August 2017 through to the 21st of February 2018. The fill material was brought onto the site between the 5th of October 2017 to the 10th of February 2018 and consisted of 18,250 metres cubed of brown sandy clay and cobbles. Fill roads were then formed by excavation and filled 900 millimetres deep, with the crushed material being stockpiled on site. So in terms of officers' recent conclusion on the environmental assessment, whilst the consultees have considered all of the environmental information submitted and have no objection, and whilst the agent's assessment identified no significant impacts in relation to the preparatory works, and the impact of the future works was also assessed, officers are of the opinion that the potential impacts of the preparatory works have not been fully considered in the environmental statement and FEI submitted. The environmental statement and further environmental information has failed to consider and take account of or evidence what impact there was in the environment at the time of the flood event, which happened on the 22nd of August 2017. The breaking up, crushing of concrete had at the time of the flood event in August 2017 had started on site. In the absence of this evidence to demonstrate the impacts of the works at the time of the flood event in August 2017, adverse impacts to River Faughan SAC ASSI cannot be ruled out. There was the potential for sediment, silt, as a result of the works on site at the time of the flood event, which could have entered River Faughan, and therefore, in taking the precautionary principle, it has not been demonstrated whether or not these works at the time of the flood event had a significant impact on the environment, and in particular on the SAC ASSI. So in considering the legal principles test of unauthorised EIA development, in cases of unauthorised EIA development, there are legal principles that must be met before any project that includes unauthorised EIA development is granted planning permission. In summary, in order to conform with the principles of EC law, the following legal principles have emerged. The first one is that the decision taker must be satisfied that there are exceptional circumstances that demonstrably justify the grant of planning permission retrospectively. The second is that the decision taker must be satisfied that the preemptive developer has not gained, and as a result of the grant of retrospective planning permission, will not gain an advantage he ought not to enjoy. And the third is that the environmental statement includes an environmental baseline that existed before any part of the unauthorised works were carried out at the site. A detailed assessment of the legal principles test is set out in Section 13 in Members' Report. But to summarise the consideration by officers in relation to the first legal principles test, which relates to exceptional circumstances to justify the grant of retrospective permission, officers have considered the information submitted by the agent to try to justify exceptional circumstances. The fact that there was an outline permission is irrelevant to the fact that the developer carried out unauthorised EAA works preemptive of any decision being taken on this reserved matters application. There are no exceptional circumstances demonstrated as to why the developer went on site and carried out these works prior to the grant of permission, regardless of the outcome of the baseline evidence. This application was deemed to be EAA development following unauthorised works being carried out, and this determination was accepted by the agent. There is no justifiable exception to grant retrospective planning permission for this application. In terms of the second legal principles test, which relates to improper advantage as a result of the grant of retrospective permission, it is the responsibility of the developer to demonstrate that he has not gained an improper advantage by carrying out the works in advance of assessment of their environmental effects. Officers have considered the agent's supporting information on the 29th of March 2021 and are of the opinion the fact that the works were undertaken in contemplation of a future permission or consideration of the baseline is not evidence that the developer did not gain unfair or improper advantage. There was and is no presumption that reserved matters would be granted, rather the application is considered on its own merits. The applicant's actions have allowed it to benefit by not following the proper planning process. Even if it is accepted that the developer did not gain an advantage, the council must still be satisfied that there are exceptional reasons why this development should be given approval. The fact that the developer did not gain an advantage is not in itself an exceptional circumstance, and officers are not in a position to lawfully conclude the legal tests for unauthorised EAA have been met so as to grant approval of this development. And the third test is the assessment of the environmental baseline. And as considered earlier, whilst the developer concluded that the preparatory works undertaken had no significant impact upon the sensitive receptors, officers would disagree in that none of the environmental information submitted in either the environmental statement or the further environmental information considered the environmental impact or effects of the works that had taken place on site at the time of the flood event in August 2017. It is evident that the breaking up and crushing of concrete had taken place on site at the time of the flood event, and these works continued after the event also. It has not been evidenced in any of the submissions what impact these works had on River Faughan, SAC, ASSI at the time of the flood event. Therefore, in the absence of this information, officers are of the opinion that it has not been clearly demonstrated or evidenced that the potential impacts of the preparatory works undertaken have been fully investigated. This proposal, therefore, has failed on all three legal principles tests, and Council could not lawfully grant permission for this unauthorised EAA development. And on this basis, officers would recommend refusal of the application. The 4 reasons are set out in your report, and the reasons for refusal are that the proposal is EAA development and the environmental statement and addenda as submitted by the applicant is insufficient as it does not consider or address all the significant environmental impacts of the unauthorised works carried out on site at the time of the flood event in August 2017 and the impacts on River Faughan, ASSI, SAC designated site. Second is that the proposal is EAA development and no exceptional circumstances have been demonstrated to justify the unauthorised development which has taken place on site prior to the grant of planning permission. The proposal is EAA development and it has not been demonstrated the developer did not gain unfair or improper advantage through the carrying out of unauthorised development which has taken place on site prior to the grant of permission. And the 4th reason is that the proposal is contrary to the Dairy Area Plan Policy EMV8 and PPS2 Natural Heritage, in that it has not been demonstrated that the works that have taken place on site have not had an adverse impact on River Faughan, SAC and ASSI. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. We have some speakers. We have Mr. Dean Blackwood speak on behalf of the objectors. Mr. Blackwood, you have 5 minutes. Just bear with us, Mr. Blackwood.
Sure.
Go ahead, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure if it's the proper time or not, but just it's probably more from the legal opinion from what we've just heard, and my sense is, should the two issues be separated, and this proposal they're together, should we, as a council, not be looking to see if the test principles have been met first, rather than maybe asking us to make a decision that breaches?
Well, I'm going to let the objectors go, and then we can have a chat about it at the end. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I'm ready to go.
Yes, if you would, sir, please.
Okay. River Faughan Anglers welcomes this Council's late acknowledgement that fundamental matters of environmental law were not addressed when this application was first recommended for approval on the 4th of December 2019. This failure put members in a position that, had they approved this application back then, they would have acted unlawfully. However, it remains of concern that members may still be under the misconception that RFA's intervention was exploiting loopholes in the legislation to circumvent the authority of the committee, or we were deploying stalling tactics to delay decisions. Again, River Faughan Anglers' intervention was to prevent members from making an unlawful decision. Therefore, I would wish to clarify and address the serious concerns previously expressed by some members when this case was discussed by the Planning Committee on the 5th of December 2019, despite being removed from the schedule the day before. And can I remind members of the assurances they received that day from senior officials that the application had been subject to, and I quote, meticulous environmental oversight, when in fact nothing could have been further from the case. Prior to that committee meeting, I legitimately and rightly alerted the Department for Infrastructure to the likely imminent breach of environmental law that would have far-reaching implications for Northern Ireland's planning system. This was because DFI is charged with providing the European Commission with assurance and real evidence that the issue of unauthorised EIA development has been understood and was being addressed by councils. This is necessary after the Commission initiated pilot case 7640 in 2015 because of Europe's concern over the systemic breach of the EIA directive taking place on the River Faughan, as reported by River Faughan Anglers in 2014. Yet the recommendation to approve this development in late 2019 was a clear indication that Council had not understood the issue of unauthorised EIA development, and was therefore perpetuating the systemic breach of planning regulation and law that is currently taxing the European Commission. And due to time constraints, I'll not go into the potential serious implications for Council. But it is important to state for the record that contrary to the unfounded criticisms of RFA's perceived motives, we did not seek to usurp the planning authority's authority. We did not request DFI to pull the application and did not abuse the planning system. Rather, for the purpose of attending the 4th of December meeting, my purpose was to alert members to the serious omissions of the original committee report in respect of the law. Nor should members be under any misapprehension that by exercising my speaking rights, this was a late intervention. RFA raised the matter of unauthorised EIA development with officials on at least 5 occasions during the processing of this case, and only with the publication of the planning report 1 week before the Planning Committee was it clear that important matters of environmental law repeatedly raised had not been taken into account. As members should now be aware, the Council's own legal advice given after the recommendation to approve states that the environmental statement and addendums submitted by the applicant are, and I quote, seriously deficient. Notwithstanding this new recommendation before you today, it should be of concern to members that seriously deficient environmental information formed the basis on which officials recommended approval. And I would respectfully suggest that members need to be less concerned with River Faughan Anglers' motives for intervention, which can be demonstrated to have always been in the members' and the public interest, and question why a seriously deficient environmental statement went undetected, despite RFA's repeated attempts to draw attention to the law in respect of unauthorised EIA development. Because the risks for this council, the public purse and our environment remain high, if members need to rely on the public to highlight fundamental failures of planning and the law. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Any questions for the objector? Okay, I'm going to now call on Chris Bryson and Andrew Ryan, who are for the agent. You've got 5 minutes to share between the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can members hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be doing the majority of the speaking with Mr. Ryan available for questions afterwards. As you've heard, this application seeks approval for detailed design matters, and members will note that the principle of development on site has already been established. The listed draft refusal reasons all relate to the principle of development, and officers are seeking to revisit this principle of development, which has already been approved. As you've heard, this application was previously listed for approval at the December 2019 Planning Committee meeting, and there's been no change to the proposal or the relevant policies since this previous recommendation to approve was made. I'll now address the references to unauthorised works that feature in 3 of the 4 draft refusal reasons. Members should note that these works were undertaken on site in order to improve site safety. At the time of demolition, the building foundations and floor slabs were left in situ, and this included steelwork that was cut just above ground level. Despite the best efforts of the applicant to secure the site, antisocial elements accessed the site, and this resulted in a personal injury claim against the applicant. Following the settlement of that claim, the applicant's insurers required that the site be made safe, hence the preparatory works referred to in draft refusals 1, 2 and 3. It should be noted that these works should have happened at the time of demolition of the buildings on site, and demolition works were carried out prior to the applicant purchasing the site. The demolition works themselves did not require planning permission or an EIA, and are standard works that would have happened anyway on site. We note that the case officer's report states that the proposal is sound in all other planning matters, such as design, layout and open space provision. Therefore, the only matters of concern that remain involve those relating to the EIA. I'll go through each of the refusal reasons in turn. In relation to refusal reason 1, the submitted EIA considers all potential impacts of the proposal, and this includes the foundation removal and site preparation works on the receiving environment. The EIA assesses the impact of these works that were undertaken between June 2017 and February 2018. And therefore, the assessment does consider potential impacts of the works during the time of the flood event in August 2017. The assessment concluded that there would have been no adverse impacts upon the River Fountain, a conclusion supported by both NIEA and Shared Environmental Services. As such, this refusal reason cannot be sustained. In response to refusal reason 2, at the time of the foundation removal and site preparation works being undertaken, the proposal was not considered to be EIA development by the Council. This determination only came 3 years after the application was lodged. This in itself should be considered an exceptional circumstance for the application, and in any event, the need to secure the site and mitigate risk of further injury claims can be considered an exceptional circumstance also. Therefore, this refusal reason cannot be sustained. In relation to refusal reason 3, the developer has not gained any advantage, financial or otherwise, from carrying out the foundation removal and site preparatory works. The principle of development on site has already been approved, and the works in question would have been needed in any event. The issue is one of timing due to site safety and the claim against the site owner. As such, the foundation removal and site preparatory works cannot be considered to result in any advantage to the applicant, and this refusal reason cannot be sustained. Finally, in response to refusal reason 4, the policy referenced from the Derry Area Plan states that development likely to introduce water pollution to an unacceptable level in a watercourse will not be permitted. Again, the submitted environmental statement assessed the potential impact of the development, including the site preparatory works, on the River Faughan and found that it would not be adversely impacted upon by the proposal. This conclusion was endorsed by DFI Rivers, NIEA and Shared Environmental Services, all of which recommended approval subject to conditions. As you've heard as well from the officer, there is a sheet piling all along the site boundary with the riverbank. This structure is considered by DFI Rivers to be a flood defence structure and excludes the application site from the floodplain. Therefore, there is no evidence to support the officer's conclusion that the proposal will result in adverse impacts on the river. Again, this refusal reason cannot be sustained. As such, we respectively ask that members reconsider the recommendation and grant planning permission for this application. And we're happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any questions to the applicant? Go ahead, Alderman McClintock.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Chris, for coming along today. I just want to be clear in my own mind. I know the site very well. I pass it 2 or 3 times a day, and I do remember the unfortunate incident when somebody was hurt when they went on site. Are you saying that the decision to do this demolition work came as after, maybe not as a result, but after the principle of development was established, that it was a case of this demolition taking place on your own land, really to make the site safe, basically? And you're telling us very clearly that there was no advantage to your developer with taking these demolition works forward. I suppose just, did you consider during that process any effect on the River Faughan? I know you mentioned the flood defence, but just can you elaborate on that? Was there consideration taken as to whether this would have any effect on the River Faughan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and I'll reply through the chair. A number of points there. Firstly, yes, the works that were undertaken on site were as a direct result of the claim against the site owner. And as I said earlier, it was a requirement of their insurer that the site was made safe. Those works were undertaken once the principle of development on site was accepted and the outline application approved. So there was a reasonable expectation of the developer and site owner that development would happen on site, subject to the approval of detailed design matters. And therefore, at that time, they didn't feel that there was any issue in going on and in effect finishing off the demolition works that had started on site. And again, members should note that demolition works in of themselves don't require planning permission. So there was no thought in the site owner's mind that he needed to seek permission for any works associated with demolition on site. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that clarity, yes.
Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. Site safety seems to be quite an important issue here. Why was that not achieved by a proper boundary barrier?
Thank you again through the chair. It's my understanding that the site was secured, but there were weaknesses elsewhere on the site boundary. As you would have seen from the officer's presentation, there are quite a number of boundaries, and it's quite difficult to keep them all secure. Again, I've been advised by the applicant that they've had to replace the fence and indeed the locks a number of times on the site as they've been broken off over the years. So it hasn't been possible to keep it kind of trespasser free, if you like, since this application has been submitted over 7 years ago.
Members, any more questions for the agent? Thank you very much for that, Mr. Bryson. Over to you, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. I'll sort of try and explain what I was trying to say earlier. And a lot of stuff it's around plan policy and interpretation and what we see and what we don't see. I'd see in this case here, and we're talking about the legal principles, and there's agreement from the onset that the legal principles haven't been met. And these are principles in case law. If we were to go forward today and approve this, we as a committee, are we in breach of case law? And, you know, and as the officer is satisfied that it hasn't been demonstrated, then are we willingly make a decision that we know is in breach of law? And that's where I'm sitting with the dilemma today, saying, even are we willingly making that decision, even though we know?
I can understand your concerns, but I'm going to ask Philip, who would come in on that first before Sarah would come in.
Yeah, so, I mean, Chair, you have the officer's views in relation to the matter and the legal principles that are set out in relation to that. But the decision makers in respect of this are still the committee. And therefore, it's the committee must make its final decision in relation to this, in relation to the interpretation of the law. The officer's view in relation to this matter is that the legal tests are not met. And if members are of the same view in relation to that, then they accept the officer's recommendation in relation to the matter. But formally, it must be the members that ultimately make that decision in relation to the matter. And if they're going to go against the officer recommendation in relation to the matter, they need to set out how they believe the legal tests in this case are met, and the officer view in relation to that would be wrong. Just say the officer's views in relation to the legal tests are very clearly set out.
Happy enough with the answer now, Councillor Gallagher. Okay, Alderman McClintock.
Thanks, Chair. Sarah, a couple of questions. Just have been jotting down things just when you were speaking. Have you any, well, there's three particular points I suppose I want to raise. Do you have any reason to believe that the applicant did gain an unfair advantage by the works that took place? I mean, is it a case that they have to prove that they didn't gain an unfair advantage, or have you any reason to believe that they did get an unfair advantage? That's my first question. And then the second one is, there was an appeal against the enforcement, and I believe the commissioner overruled the enforcement. And I can't remember just the words that were used, but they overruled it and said that there was no material benefit did occur. And I suppose I'm just wondering how much weight is given to the commissioner's finding on that. And the third, I suppose, maybe a comment really, is the consultees, there's no issues of any particular significance from any of the consultees. I mean, the big one would have been the flood risk, and obviously I did see the flood and was very much involved in activities at that time, but there is no indication that the flood was in any way caused or worsened by anything on that site. So really this is all down to the issues, the legal issues about whether or not those works, the demolition works, should have taken place before the determination came before. So just would like your comments on that, just to clarify that in my own head. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Your first point there was in relation to the legal test about unfair advantage. So I suppose the information that was provided and submitted to officers, officers have considered that and are of the opinion that it has not been demonstrated that the developer has not gained unfair and proper advantage. I think that, or I suppose our consideration of that is quite clearly set out in the report, and maybe Philip will want to come in after answer your other questions to, if that doesn't really answer it clearly enough for you. In relation to the appeal from the enforcement appeal. So the works that had taken place on site were subject to an enforcement notice and were also subject to an appeal. I suppose from officers' assessment in terms of the environmental assessment and the baseline evidence which was required, this had to consider and assess then in detail the unauthorised works that had taken place on site, and it was through the baseline evidence and the environmental assessments and addenda we assessed, you know, what the material was that had been put on site, what the actual works were that had taken place, and I suppose the enforcement notice and the enforcement appeal and officers' assessment of the environmental baseline are two completely separate issues and really aren't that relevant. And then in relation to the point with regards to flood risk, as part of the proposed development, and I know you've referred to the planning policy and the advice from consultees, so the proposed development in terms of a housing layout does meet the PPS 15 in terms of the layout, and that, you know, one film would be required on the site so that the proposed housing and the levels would be above the Q100 floodplain. And that's why it meets planning policy with that respect. So I'm not sure if that answers your questions or not, Alderman.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah, through the chair. I suppose just I was trying to clarify, really this is all based on the effect really on the River Falcon, and I'm wondering, I suppose in my own head, it's a site that has been derelict for years and years, probably near enough 20 years. So from a local point of view, want to see it developed, but obviously want to see it developed in a safe way. So just I suppose the worry going through my head is this a site that could ever be developed if it's all based on the River Falcon? But thank you, Sarah, for that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions for Sarah? Okay, before we move to the floor for any proposals, I'd just like to just say we must consider the legal concerns which were raised by Councillor Gallagher and the advice we received from the Philip, the legal team, before we would make a decision. Do you wish to come in, Councillor Gallagher?
Thank you, Chair. Just from the last speaker from the office there, it's clear, you know, that a lot of the works was unauthorised. You know, we've heard some allegation to that, but it was unauthorised. Therefore, we're in breach of the law and grant permission. Therefore, I propose we go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Mr. Jackson. Have any of those against? Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair, and I had been indicating to speak, but no, but I had my hand up to indicate to speak, but I am happy, reluctantly happy to second the proposal made by Councillor Gallagher, because this is it was a difficult decision for the committee. I think we all acknowledge the housing need. We all acknowledge the need for housing right across our city and district. And the principle of housing has been established on this site, but what hasn't been demonstrated enough, in my view anyway, is the protections that's been offered to a special designated site, namely the River Falcon. And the applicant did demonstrate or allude to in his presentation that the site itself, the application itself, meets a lot of the policy tests. So in a normal site, this would be a very good application and a welcome application. But the unique thing around this application is that it is running adjacent to the River Falcon. I know as a council, it was only a few weeks ago where we signed up to the rights of nature, and that should have a bearing in the decisions that we are taking as a council. I can't imagine another site that would have would have the potential to impact nature as much as right next to the River Falcon, and a special designated site. So on that basis, I haven't been I haven't received enough information to give the guarantees that the adequate protection has been afforded to the River Faughan, and on that basis, I'm happy to second the proposal by Councillor Gallagher. Thanks, Chair.
Anyone else want to speak on the proposal? Okay, shall we go for a vote? All those, huh? Sorry, I might as well. All those in favour? Oh, yeah. Those against? Any abstainers? Okay, 10, 2 and 1. That's approved then. No, it's not approved, sorry. We approve the recommendation of the planner. Refuse. Okay, we're now going to move on to item 2, LA 11-2019-0374F, and Andre is going to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 2 is LA 11-2019-0374F, and the application is for 14 social and affordable housing units, 12 semi-detached and 2 detached two-storey dwellings, and it's located on lands between number 85 and 93 Airby Road, Tamnairn in County Derry, and the recommendation is to refuse. So the application site is located off Airby Road to the south of the development limits of Tamnairn, which is defined as a small settlement in the Derry Area Plan 2011. The site is indicated in red on the site location plan and the aerial photographs on the slide. And this is just a photograph of the site when viewed from Airby Road. The site is agricultural grassland with hedgerows on its boundaries. And this is just another photograph, and this is taken just within the site, adjacent to the Airby Road, and it is looking towards the settlement limits of Tamnairn in the distance there. So members, this is the proposed block plan showing the bulk development of 14 dwellings, 12 semi-detached and 2 detached houses with associated and curtilage car parking. There is an adopted road proposed through the centre of the site from Airby Road and 2 private roads to provide access to the rear of the proposed dwellings which front onto Airby Road. And this slide just shows an elevation of the proposed dwellings. They are 2-storey in height. They are of a simple design with local stone cladding proposed on the lower ground floor on the front elevation. And members, this slide just shows the dwellings to the rear of the site. It's more a streetscape, and it just shows how the application is addressing the slight gradient of the site within the design and the finished floor levels. So the application has been assessed against all relevant policies and the Derry Area Plan, and the policies are set out there on the slide. So the site is shown in the context of with the development limits of the Tamnairn village in this slide. The map below shows the site in the context, and there is one agricultural field separating the site from the development limit, sorry. The applicant has indicated that lands to the north, east and south of the site are within the control of the applicant. So consultation responses received during the process of the application, and they were from NIEA Drainage and Water, NIEA Natural Heritage, NI Water, Shared Environmental Services, DFI Roads, Lochs Agency, Environmental Health Department, DFI Rivers and Northern Ireland Housing Executive. and the detailed consideration of all the consultation responses are set out in the planning report. And in summary, all consultees are content, subject to conditions and informatives. So during the processing of the application, 2 letters of support were received in October 2020 from 1 councillor and 1 MLA. The main issues raised were that they supported the application and that the area needs more affordable housing, and the proposal will revamp the area and will incentivise young people to reconsider moving away. The new primary school, GAA club and local community need young people to stay in the area to ensure survival of this rural community. There were further 6 letters of support received from 4 different households in February 2021, and they have all raised the same issues, namely the support for the principle of social housing, as there are no social houses or private houses for sale in the Tamnairn area. The social housing will help support the new primary school as approved, and the club and the chapel, and this will stop the drain of young people leaving the area. Officers acknowledge the letters of support and have assessed that there is a need for social and affordable housing in this area. Officers have consulted with the housing executive during the processing of the application, and officers are supportive of the provision of housing. However, the concerns regarding the site and layout are set out in detail in the planning report. So in terms of the policy consideration, PPS 21 CTY 5 supports development for up to 14 social and affordable dwellings adjacent to or near a small settlement. The application must be made by a registered housing association and a demonstrable need identified by the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, which cannot readily be met within an existing settlement in the locality. Officers are content that the application meets the above tests. In assessing the acceptability of the site, Policy CTY 5 sets out a sequential test in terms of location. So the first test says that land should be adjacent to the settlement limits, or if that is not met, a site close to the settlement limit, which currently contains buildings or is in a degraded or derelict state, and where there is an opportunity to improve the environment. Or thirdly, an undeveloped site in close proximity to the settlement, where the development could be visually integrated into the landscape. The policy also states that proposals will need to be sited and designed to integrate sympathetically with their surroundings and meet other planning criteria and policy requirements. So officers have set out in detail in the planning report that they do not consider that the application site as proposed meets the sequential test in terms of location and other policy concerns in terms of integration and effect of the proposed development on the character of this area contained within policies PPS 21, CTY 13, 14 and 15. So again, members, this is just showing the map again with the application site indicated to the south of the development limits of Tamnairn Small Settlement. So the divorced nature of the site can be seen, and this has raised concerns by officers over its integration and impact and character, separation from the settlement, the exposed nature of the site and its potential to create urban sprawl. There is 1 agricultural field separating the site from the development limits to the north. The applicant has indicated that they own control land to the immediate north, east and south of the site. DFI Roads have advised that a safe access can be achieved from the field to the north of the application site, but on its extreme southern boundary. So in terms of PPS 7, quality residential environments, the application site is visually separated from the closest housing within the development limits and is located in open countryside. There is little vegetation on the site to aid integration. Amended plans were received during the processing of the application, which reduced the standard and width of the roadways to the north and south internally in the site for rear access to dwellings which front onto Tamnairn Road. These roads will now not be adopted and will remain private. Officers consider that the layout still remains suburban in nature and overly engineered and roads dominated for its rural context. The development will be highly visible from the public road, that is Airview Road, when travelling in both directions. Officers have concerns with the proposed private amenity space for a number of dwellings, and detailed consideration of all of the above is set out in detail in the planning report. So again, members, this is just shows an extract from the plans as submitted by the applicant. So the map on the left shows an example of the inadequate and inappropriate garden spaces. This is shown in Site 1 and Site 2 on this slide. As you can see, Site 1 only has a side garden beyond the front building line of the dwelling. The extract on the right shows the unacceptable suburban nature of the layout that is inappropriate for this rural location, and just shows that the site is quite dominated by roadways, both the adopted road and the private roads to access the development. So in summary and conclusion, whilst officers are supportive with the principle of social and affordable housing for up to 14 units as allowed for in PPS 21 CTY 5, officers do consider that the development does not meet the sequential test within this policy and other policy tests in terms of integration and character. Officers consider that the form and layout is suburban and overly engineered given its rural context and open nature of the site, and there are also issues in terms of private amenity space for the proposed residents. Therefore, officers recommend refusal of the application and that it is contrary to the Derry Area Plan, PPS 21, CTY 1, 5, 13, 14 and 15 and PPS 7 criteria A and C. Detailed refusal reasons are set out in the planning report and in the following slide. Thank you, members.
Thank you for that, Sarah. We have a couple of speakers on behalf of the applicant. Councillor Jim McKeever. Councillor McKeever, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Hear me okay?
Thank you.
Right. Thanks for inviting me to speak. I live less than a quarter of a mile from this proposed site, and the site talking about is within the 30-mile speed limit. So I don't see that there's an issue with where they're located along the edge of on the opposite side of Gaelic Hall facility. Like all rural areas, we've been affected with young adults moving out in the local rural community, not just through opportunities, but a lot move out because there's nowhere to live, to sell a home elsewhere due to the lack of housing within our area. And we all know from various applications to council, when young people move away, it's very unlikely to ever move back. They definitely don't come back and settle. They might come back to visit. Therefore, the local people here recognise the need for affordable housing in the Tammany area, and it has been mentioned by Andre. And this is an ideal site, as far as I'm concerned, adjacent to the Slackman's Gaelic facility, which is a huge focal point for the surrounding area. The Gaelic Hall and the local St Mary's Catholic Church, there's a new primary school, Our Lady of Fatima, which was to be started, was delayed, and is supposed to be now starting to be built in August this year. And then the opposite road like that. So I mean, I don't see that it's going to be out of place where it's been built. I think it's an ideal site. I've met with local residents. I've met with the GA members. I've met with a local priest. I haven't had any in this development. To the contrary, I've had numerous local conversations supporting this housing development. So I'd like to urge to look at this positively on this application. As you'll see, in the consultees, there was no issues with them. I mean, they're happy enough for them to go ahead. It seems to be an issue what they look like or how the roads are laid out. But I just think that there's in this area, there isn't any local opposition to having this built. The Kevin Watson Group, the Housing Association, did some type of development down in Eglinton on Killifanny Road recently, was a complete success, and it's farther outside from houses than what this application is. So I would urge again, members, look at this positively and pass this application today. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McKeever. I'm going to hand across now to Mr. Kennedy, the agent.
Yes, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair, councillors, thank you for the Planning Committee's condolences on the passing of my father last month and the deferral of this application for a month then. Thank you also for allowing me to address the Planning Committee on this planning application. Planning application raises a number of planning issues which I propose to address in this presentation. One, who's doing it? The application is submitted by Apex Housing Association in conjunction with Kevin Watson Builders. Both these parties are well known to the Council for providing social housing in this area. We recently delivered a similar social housing scheme at Cullifinney Road outside Eglinton, just beside the Maxwell petrol filling station. These 14 houses at Cullifinney Meadows have been very successful. They have helped meet the significant social housing need in Eglinton. The same professional team proposed to do something similar here on this site. Two, is there a housing need? The Housing Executive have confirmed a social housing need in Tamnairn and their support for the application. There's also significant need for affordable housing in Tamnairn. As Councillor McKeever has pointed out, young families and young people are being forced out of the area into the city, nearby towns and villages, as there's no available houses for sale and a significant affordability issue with those that are for sale. I think this proposal meets the need for both social and affordable housing in Tamnairn, and I think that Councillor McKeever has set that forward in some detail. Three, is there any available land in Tamnairn for social housing? Planning have already confirmed that there is no available land for social housing within Tamnairn. Planning policy allows the Housing Association in these circumstances to look outside the settlement limits for a site. Four, does this proposal meet policy CTY 5 and PPS 21? In terms of whether the proposal is in close proximity to the settlement, which is the planning policy test, I have asked councillors to consider these facts. One, the application site is located within the 30-mile speed limit along Airview Road, which is also defined by the actual road signs and also the pink tarmac marking, which is quite impressive and quite delineates the start of the settlement on the road. Two, there's already street lighting along this section of Airview Road. Three, there's already a public footpath along this section of Airview Road. Four, it's directly opposite the new primary school site. Five, it's directly opposite the GEA club. And six, it's significantly closer to the settlement than the Eglinton proposal previously approved by the council. I believe that all these factors have already urbanised this area of Airview Road and this part of the site. In terms of policy CTY 5, yes, it sets out a sequential test in terms of assessing application sites, but the proposal meets the sequential test in criteria A, as the application site is located adjacent to the existing settlement limits of Tamnairn and is only 5 metres from the settlement limits to the northwest, and it also faces a new primary school at this location. The proposal also meets the sequential test in criteria C, as it is an undeveloped site in close proximity to the settlement where the development could be visually integrated into the landscape. You may ask, why this site? Planning state that they have no objection to the principle of the proposal, but would prefer it in Field 1, immediately adjacent to the development limit to the north. However, this proposal requires a 90-metre visibility display from the proposed access point along Airview Road. Field 1 currently has a frontage of 90 metres. Number 93 Airview Road, the last house within the settlement, has a boundary hedge which is built out onto the roadside with no verge. That means there's no visibility across it. Therefore, we can't achieve a vehicular access within Field 1 when the scheme requires a 90-metre visibility display in both directions from the access point, and the field is only a frontage of 90 metres. Vehicular access has to be in Field 2. The only feasible alternative would be to provide the housing in Field 1 and provide the access points separately in Field 2. However, this would have a number of disadvantages compared to the current proposal. One, an access point and road in the middle of Field 2, divorced from the housing in Field 1, and coming through into Field 1 would be visually intrusive, alien, and entirely out of keeping in the rural area. Two, the access road would have to punch through the existing mature hedgerow into Field 1 to actually gain access to the housing development, and come through a significant proportion of undeveloped field 1, 2 as well. 3, it would also force new residents looking to access the primary school and the chapel into a tortuous pedestrian route, forcing them to walk out of the settlement up the Airview Road to access the primary school and chapel opposite. And 4, sorry?
Excuse me, Matt, your 5-minute speaking allowance is up.
Chair, I just have one further point to speak in relation to the amenity space, which I would like
Okay, I'll let you put that through.
Thank you. In terms of private amenity space, Creating Places states in paragraph 519 that residents should be provided with a range of back garden sizes to promote choice. Creating Places also states that garden sizes should range from 40 to 7 square metres. None of these houses have a back garden or a side garden less than 40 square metres, and the largest is a side garden of 145 square metres. When you add all the garden sizes of all these houses together, you get an average back garden size of 75 square metres, which is above that actually required by Creating Places for any individual dwelling. The proposal also provides a significant amount of public open space within the housing scheme for residents' use. There's a public green to the front of houses 9
Matt,
to 14.
can you bring it to a close, please?
Yes, and there's pockets of public open space throughout. There's more than 1,000 square metres of public open space within the scheme. Therefore, Chair, I would simply respectfully request that the council approve this application. Thank you.
Okay, members, any questions to the applicant? Go ahead, Derek. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. There's the issue of sustainability, has been mentioned, sustainability in the countryside, and quite often that refers to the access to utilities. You've clearly indicated there the access to street lighting, to the footpath, and that sort of thing. Wastewater treatment works. Is the capacity available in that rural settlement for the additional housing? Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Okay, through the chair, yes, Councillor, I can confirm that has been acknowledged and confirmed by Northern Ireland Water.
Any further questions for the agent? Go ahead there.
It may have been addressed, I might have missed it, but the amenity space that was mentioned by Andre, could Matt maybe address that, or the lack of some the houses?
Okay, Matt, if you'd like to address that.
Yeah, Creating Places sets out guidance in terms of private amenity space. And what it says is that you shouldn't have any houses that have a garden space less than 40 square metres. And they ask that the minimum should be between 40 and 70 square metres, depending on the size of the house. Some of our houses are 2-bedroom houses, some of our houses are 3-bedroom houses, but none of our houses has a minimum of any less than 40 square metres. So we're meeting the requirements of Creating Places. But what Creating Places, Councillor, also asked for is that they say, listen, we're in the business of providing choice. So if people want a big backyard, they can pick a big garden. If people want a smaller backyard, they can pick a smaller backyard. But what they propose in Creating Places is that you look at a scheme and you look at the totality of private amenity space that's being provided. Look at that in terms of the number of houses that's being provided. And if you get an average of over 70 square metres per house, then that's acceptable. In this case, the average on this scheme is over 70 square metres. It's actually 75 square metres per house. So therefore, in terms of Creating Places, not only have we met the minimum, but we are actually providing more than the minimum. We are actually beyond the maximum. In terms of 70 square metres, we are actually at 75 square metres. And that's before you even consider the public open space, which we have calculated out at 1,000 square metres of public open space, which is usable and is also surveyed. And actually, if you look at it, the 6 houses to the site actually have a public green in front of them where children can play and recreate.
Does that answer your question, Councillor McGuire? Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Andre? Not Andre, sorry. No? There's Andre. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Boyle, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to explore that private amenity space element to the debate a little bit further. If Andre could perhaps outline how she sees it from her particular perspective. I mean, evidently the report that we have here in front of us is saying that the private amenity space for sites 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13 wouldn't be viewed as sufficient. And I'm sure we all appreciate and understand that we want to see social housing developments, but I think the important thing is if we're going to have social housing developments, they must be of a quality where those who live in them have a quality of life as well, and that they are given the appropriate and significant recreation space or private space. So again, I would just like to hear further exposition of that, if that would be possible, Chair.
Thank you for that, John. Over to you, Andre.
Yeah, through the chair, it is set out in the planning officer report. You know, creating places does give guidance as to the size of amenity areas for dwellings of particular sizes, and the guidance is 70 square meters. So on sites, as Councillor Boyle has alluded to, on sites 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and 13, which is the majority of the sites, they don't have that amenity space that would be the guidance. Now it is also accepted that we do accept some garden spaces within a development that have a lower amenity space, you know, down to 40, 50 square meters, but that would be an exception. And I suppose that's what Matt's alluding to, or sorry, the agent's alluding to there, that there is choice. Some people do prefer smaller gardens, but there should be a minimum. We do have a particular concern over site 1 because they have very, very little rear amenity space. It is all to the side and at the front of the dwelling. So it's that usable private amenity space that there is concerns with here, with that particular issue with PPS 7 and the amenity space provision. Sorry, I know it's not a question, just want to clarify as well. Do you know the agent had raised during the processing of the application about the access onto Airview Road, and that they couldn't provide an access further to the north of the site, and they field 1. So the clarification was sought by officers from DFI Roads, and they have confirmed that an access is possible from site 1, but it would need to be on very, very close to the extreme southern boundary of that upper field, as it were. I just wanted to clarify that. Hope that answers your question.
Are you happy enough for that, Councillor Boyle?
Just one element of clarity in relation to that latter point then. So would the concerns then be, through you, Chair, to Andre, would the concerns then be then there would be road safety matters that we be taken into consideration as well?
I suppose what I'm trying to say is that the application that's in front of members today, that has been consulted with DFI Roads, and they're content with the proposal as put forward. It's just whenever we were exploring that other option of the upper field and why that couldn't be used as an application site or for the development for the houses, and that was an argument put forward by the agent that they couldn't actually get an access under that upper field between this site and the development limits. So we just explored that with Roads, who advised that yes, you could get an access into that upper field, but it would be through the extreme southern boundary. So just at the north end of this site, the application site, and the south end of the site, between the development limits and the application site. That makes sense. But this application, as it stands, with the access taken off Airview Road through the centre of this site, is acceptable in terms of road safety.
Councillor Dobbin.
Sorry, Chair, it's just been answered. Thank you.
Okay, Maura, you want to come in?
Just members to clarify, just to make sure, point we're making here in terms of the policy. is that, you know, what we're asking from the applicant or the agent is why there was a need to choose a site further away from the development limit. And I suppose the reason that was given to us was the reason that obviously the officers outlined. So it's just important that as we wouldn't normally go into that detail on the context, but that was obviously a fundamental reason and a focus in terms of the reason for refusal is the location of the site. We're not against the number of units, and the policy does allow for this in the countryside. However, it is predicated with those criteria, and that's why we needed to ask those questions. And I suppose while I'm on the floor, Chair, the other point as the head of planning I would like to focus on is also my concern over the actual the layout. I mean, this is in a rural area. We talked a lot, members, regarding the design and quality design in the countryside. And this particular site is over-engineered. In my view, it's a very old-style urban type response to the site where there's a high percentage of road in the layout and doesn't appear to be required. In my view, if you were building what this is meant to be, it's meant to be a small clachan in the age of a settlement, which is why the policy is there. And I suppose that's just what I want members to reflect on. It's in the report and the officer's report. But I would be concerned about that in terms of the discussions we've had as members in terms of the scale and the nature and why we need so much percentage of road on the site is questionable. So just leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, any more questions from the floor there? Can we have a proposal from the floor? Okay, no proposal from the floor?
I propose we go with Officer's recommendation, Chair, and there is a number of reasons for that as well. And to see when we hear saying that people can have a choice, and particularly in social housing, when people have been homeless for a very long time, the choice gets removed from them, and they'll take whatever they get. And I think as planners, we need to protect that and have a bare minimum that can't be breached. And I think that if we keep reducing those amenities and then people take it because their circumstances forces them into it, and then at a later date, when they get used to that, and then they're saying, I want more amenities, and how come there isn't amenities here? I think that we need to give protection to that. And when I see that big plot of land to one side and a road that's in there, that could have been very much pushed to another side to increase the amenities. That sort of surprises me that the promoter of this hasn't been back and forward with the planners to make this fit, because it could have been made fit. And on that grounds, I'd go with the recommendation.
Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, Chair. I share that view, and I'm content to second the proposal from Councillor Gallagher. I certainly feel that there may well have been opportunities to make this fit appropriately and provide the level of accommodation and amenity space that everybody deserves to live in. I think it's over-engineered, and for that matter, I find myself agreeing with the officer recommendation, so I am content to second the proposal from Councillor Gallagher. It's one thing to say, sorry, it's just one thing to say, Chair, that we want to see social housing provided. Of course we do. We want good social housing. We want proper amenity space for social housing. And that's my view on it. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle.
Chair,
Okay.
am I allowed to come back in? Chair.
No, I'm sorry, you had your time. Sorry. Thank you. Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify the amenity space, because we have really conflicting views from the agent and the officer regarding this space. We have all raised our concerns about previous housing developments that were there, and they're building houses, not homes. And we are very much in favour of people building up communities and having that amenity space. But I was satisfied after hearing the agent speak that he has assured members here today that there's, in fact, their minimum was 75 and over, not the 70. I know we can't go back to the agent, but that is the view that I have taken from what I have heard today. So that's my views.
Just get more to clarify that. What is the rules?
Yeah, I think Andre came back and clarified that, Councillor Mellon, in terms of the number of actual dwellings did not meet that criteria. So we'll get Andre to come back again and clarify which ones. I think she highlighted the numbers. We've obviously got a small number anyway, but there's a difference between obviously private amenity space and public amenity space. So I'm just clarifying, you just mean the private amenity space for each of the dwellings? Yeah. So Andre, could you come in there and just go back over that again and highlight which units don't have, and then overall, give the overall percentage then in terms of the units of the whole scheme? Thanks.
So in page 123 of the members pack there, the planning report, it gives it out there. Creating Places gives guidance in relation to private garden amenity space, private garden space, and the private amenity space for back gardens have not met standards for size, and that gives in brackets 70 metres square on sites 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So that's the majority of the sites apart from number 14. The case officer is also saying it should also be noted that none of the sites have a 10-metre back garden depth as advised in Creating Places guidance. While council would allow a reduction in exceptional cases, and if a garden space of approximately 50 square metres is acceptable, then the following sites would still be unacceptable in terms of private amenity space, and that's sites 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, it goes into a bit of detail then about site 1, and that doesn't have any rear private amenity space at all. Well, very, very little rear amenity space that would be considered to be private. All the amenity space there at site 1 is located to the side and the front, which is on the Airview Road. So hope that answers your question.
Sorry, Andre, could you just clarify what the standard is at 70 square metres? It's just to clarify that for members.
Yeah, so it's 70 square metres, but that would be in Creating Places guidance. It's not in policy, but it's in the guidance.
Yeah, thank you. That's.
Alderman Hussey, you wish to come in, sir?
Thank you, Chair. I'm confused here. I mean, the sustainability issue from my perspective has been achieved from what I've heard. My main query, as you know, was on the wastewater treatment works, but the rest of it, you know, as a settlement, I would see this as being sustainable in that it can link with the rural settlement adjacent to it. The whole issue of amenity, I mean, I'm looking at that development and I'm comparing that to small rural developments that I know. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking the folk that live in those particular ones that I know would be delighted with that sort of access to space and proper roadways within their small cluster, rural cluster. And you know, I have good empathy with what we heard from Councillor McKeever. You know, rural communities do need this housing. I think I don't see why this cannot be approved. I think it meets the requirements. I admit that, and I think planners have said, you know, the northern field might be a more appropriate field, but that's not the field that we're being offered here. In fact, I'd like to think that it might be something that would happen down the line. The fact that it's outside the settlement limits, we're dealing with settlement limits that are how old? I don't know. With regard to the Dare area plan, but I'm minded at this moment to support the applicant and not the current proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jackson, you wish to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and I'm conscious that there is a proposal on the floor that's been seconded, but I'm like a previous speaker, I'm not entirely comfortable with the proposal that's been made. Again, it's, in my view, when I look at it, I believe that this application does meet the policy of CTY 5, and it is next or near the settlement limits, and I do acknowledge that there is an identified need, social housing need within that small settlement, and we all know the challenges that we face in terms of delivering social housing, particularly in small settlements. And this is, in my view, an ideal site adjacent to a GAA pitch, adjacent to a new primary school that's yet to be constructed. I find it difficult to see how this could, or they support the refusal reasons that this would be in somehow suburban and erode the rural character of this particular area. I accept the points that have been made around the reductions of standards. My reading of the application, I don't see a reduction of standards. The property in number 1 that's been identified or that has been touched on quite a few times during this application. There is amenity space. It's not all private, but there's amenity space there, and I think I feel uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with the proposal that this is somehow a reduction in standards. I don't see that, and I won't be voting in support of the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jackson.
Chair, Chair, could I come in here on the private amenity space, just in terms of a matter of
Sorry,
a
Mr.
number of
Kennedy,
matters?
you've had, Mr. Kennedy, there is protocol you
Yes.
need to follow. Thank you. Councillor Dobbins.
Thank you, Chair, and I have my hand up before anybody else. I echo Councillor Jackson's thoughts there. I'm on the same line. I do think that there is adequate amenity in that area, and I know where Andre's coming about the side garden and the back garden, you know, and no front garden. I think that's the way it is. But I do think that there is adequate. I'm looking at that map that shows the houses surrounded by the green areas. Now this is the private amenity I'm talking about, and I do think it's adequate. And like the public amenity is more than adequate as an other, and given the social need for houses in that area, like where else can they build? Now it's already been established that there's no other site for this type of development, and yeah, for such a place like Tamnairn, people do like to live, be parochial, for want of a better word, and would like to live where they have been born and reared. So I'm sort of going against the officer's recommendation here, Chair.
Sorry, Alderman McClintock.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose I initially was persuaded that this application should be passed, because I think the site, I have no issues with the site. I think next to the proposed school, next to the GA, next to the chapel, it all sounds absolutely excellent. And I think it is, as far as the site goes, I can see the benefits of that. But what my issue with is I am persuaded by the officer's comments about the layout of it. There's so much road, and I don't believe that the private amenity is sufficient. And I think it really is, as somebody said, a wasted opportunity, because this site, I'm sure, could have been developed in some other way. Obviously, being no expert, but I feel it could have been designed in such a way that there was more adherence to the creating spaces criteria. And I don't think, even though it's a site, and obviously rural housing is needed and in this area is needed, but I don't think that we should lower standards for it. I think that the agent has missed an opportunity here. So I will be agreeing with Councillor Gallagher's proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just making maybe a query to officers as, do you know if this was to go forward? Because there seems to be a lot talking about it, but is there a potential that conditions could be put on this, in the sense of looking at the site and all the rest? Is this site open for infill at a later date, that this site is actually planned and people are looking at and saying, let's lose the amenities here, because 3 years down the line we'll put another 6 houses, 7 houses, 10 houses, and this is one way and means of not working with the planners to provide 14 adequate social housing units that could be enjoyed by people in the countryside. But we will take advantage of that, and at some stage we'll create infill and everybody's living on top of each other with no amenities whatsoever. That's the danger of me. Rose?
I'm going to pass this to Maura to give you an answer.
Sorry, I suppose it's probably more of a comment, Councillor Gallagher, but I mean, I think the policy is very clear. Principle of this policy to allow, this number of social housing is for this number only. And essentially, that's why officers are paying particular attention to the wording of the policy, because you're exceptionally stepping outside, the settlement limit. And in order to do so, we're considering the exact site. And we're here, we obviously hear what members are saying, and the principle of this is established in terms of there's a need, and the policy allows for that number. But that's why I suppose officers are being particular about the location of it, in terms of leapfrogging the settlement limit and leaving opportunities for gaps in the future date. And my commentary in and around the over engineering of the site, and I suppose that's all. I don't want to comment on that any further. So that's the way I would comment on that. And maybe, Chair, I'll leave it back with you.
Thank you for that, Maura. I have Councillor McGuire.
One more point of clarity on the amenity space. The agent did say that it was a minimum of 40 square meters. Could somebody clarify, is that right? Is it a minimum of 40 square meters in the Creating Places document? He said that they have met all that.
Could you answer that, please?
Yes, through the chair. So the Creating Places guidance document, it just says on greenfield sites and in lower density developments, all houses should have an area of private open space behind the building line. The overall design concept for the development will determine the setting for houses, including the level of private back garden provision. To promote choice for residents, a variety of different garden sizes should be provided, and back garden provision should therefore be calculated as an average space standard for the development as a whole, and should be around 70 square meters per house or greater. Garden sizes larger than the average will generally suit dwellings designed for use by families, while smaller areas will be more appropriate for houses with 1 or 2 bedrooms, or houses located opposite or adjacent to public or communal open space. For any individual house, however, an area less than around 40 square metres will generally be unacceptable. And again, members, this is creating places guidance. It's not policy at the minute.
Happy enough. Okay, Alderman Carrigan.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. I would have had concerns, to be fair, there in regards to comments that Councillor Gallagher has raised. Just if the ownership of the full field is with the applicant, that's the layout there. I wouldn't have just been content with it, because it almost looks, I know we don't have that before us today, but there could be additions to this in the future. But it was one wee simple query, or two wee queries in that one there. I'm just looking at the detailed map there with the orange houses and the pink houses or dwellings and something on there. Are there going to be designated as private roads in that? No? Or did I miss that? Or is that just because that only ended up as a departure in my own view? But that's by the by. But I'm just wondering there, and I know it's not applicable, but it content me. We're still working under the Derry area plan for this section here. The LDP, when we eventually get it sorted, I'm not 100% sure in regards to the boundary here for Tammany Hearing and that. Will there be additional increase in the size of this area? According to the LDP, you know, the town limit or the settlement limits, is it designated that will increase to incorporate this field and the field adjoining, seeing as you do have the potential of the school and the GAA ground in there? Is there going to be a rounding off of the settlement, or is that not going to happen? It's just to get clarification in my own head. Is there due to be that? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I have Philip would like to come in, please.
I'll let Maura deal with the issue in relation to the LDP, if that's okay, but I did just want to remind members that just for clarity, that we have to deal with the application as it appears in front of us, and we can't speculate on any future applications that might be forthcoming. That I'm just putting that formally on the record.
Chair, my query was about conditions.
Okay, any more questions? I'll bring Maura back in here just regards the proposal.
Just Councillor Kerrigan, in terms of the LDP, the future emerging policy, we can't take that into account. You know, it's the Derry area plan and the current PPS is the stage only.
Okay, then members, we're going to take a vote on the proposal is from the floor. We agree with the offers. Sorry, Councillor, go ahead.
Chair, just about clarity, I think it was Alderman Kerrigan raised in relation to the streets themselves. Maybe I'm wrong, but was there any suggestion these would be made private, unadopted at some stage? Was there some sort of mention of private streets? Maybe
I can come in there, Chair, if you want me to answer that.
Please, Andre.
So if members look at the layout, so the internal road that runs through the centre of the site will be adopted. So that's an adoptable road to an adoptable standard. And then there's lighter grey roadways that run along the back of the houses that front onto Airview Road. And at one point in the application, those were also to be adopted. So they run to towards the land to the north and to the south of the application site, and that was amended by the applicant, and those roads now will not be adopted, so they will be private roadways. So there's one adopted road through the site, and then the roads on either side that access the back of the dwellings along the front will be private and not adopted by roads. I hope that answers your question.
Chair, just one follow-up, my apologies. In light of that information, who's going to maintain, or whose duty is to maintain those unadopted roads in that area? Anybody in question that?
Through the chair, that would, yes, so if a road's not adopted, it has to be maintained by the developer or the residents.
Are there any confirmations from the developer that they're going to maintain them?
not,
Sorry, Chair.
not through the planning
Just
application.
Can
Or
I
just
just come in,
there, could you?
unless it would have to be done by condition, and unless it's done by a planning agreement, or, you know, that's the only way that we can manage and control it and monitor it. We've obviously discussed all of that through the LDP process and how we're considering the changes that we're making, but currently that would be the only way, would be through conditions. And it would be with the developer or a residence company.
Okay, any more from the floor, please? Okay, can we take a vote? And the vote is on the proposal from the floor to agree with officers' recommendations. All in favour? Those against? Any abstainers? I shouldn't have said that. Okay, we have a split vote here, 6 for, 6 against. And I'm not quite sure on the procedure there. On the cast and vote, I would overturn the officer's recommendation. Okay, learning curve. Okay, can we have a new proposal from the floor, please?
Can I propose that the application be approved?
We have a seconder for that, please. Are we going to place any conditions on that? Can we have reasons, Derek, please?
I've already stated them. I believe that the sustainability issues are capable of being addressed, have been addressed, and indeed I'm content with the amenity provision within the project. Thank you.
We have a seconder, please. Mr. Jackson. And are we going to have any conditions on this?
Through the chair, can I just suggest that conditions would be their standard conditions, and the conditions that would be standard from the consultees, and also as the provision under CTY 5 for social and affordable housing, that there's a condition placed on the permission that it should be maintained as such for social and affordable housing in perpetuity. And also that prior to commencement of development, that the open space manager and details of managing the open space and the private roads are to be agreed in writing with the council.
Absolutely no problems with those being
Okay.
conditions on my proposal. Absolutely none.
Okay, so the proposal on the floor is that members overturn the decision by the officer. Show of hands, please. All agreeing with that proposal? Those against? Six, 4. 6, 4, 5 against. Any abstains? Okay, you've been abstaining right there over it. Okay, 6, 4, 5 against, 2 abstentions. Yeah, we're going to take a break now. 15 minutes we'll take. Okay. Recommendation. Okay, everyone, we get on our seats, please. Right, members, we're going to move on now to item number 5, LA 1120171115F, and Andre is going to take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5 is an application for short-let tourist apartment suite development with 22 number suites, and it's on lands adjacent to 6 Great James's Street and Derry, and the recommendation is to approve. So the site is located at the lower end of Great James's Street in the city. It's adjacent to Edward Street and to the rear of the newly constructed Holiday Inn. Number 6 Great James's Street is located to the west of the site, and the site itself is currently vacant. So this is just a photograph. It's a view of the site from Great James's Street, with the Holiday Inn Express to the right of the photo and 6 Great James's Street to the left. So this is the block plan which was submitted through the processing of the application, and this block plan shows the ground floor layout of the proposed development. There is an existing electrical substation on the site which will be incorporated into the new building on the ground floor. And the main access to the site is via Great James's Street to the front of the building. And this is the proposed elevation onto Great James's Street. It is of a contemporary design, which officers consider will provide a strong positive street frontage and will sit well with the eclectic mix of design in the immediate and wider area. The agent has also provided the detail of brick that is proposed for the building, which will be used on the front and part of the side elevation onto Edward Street. And this is the proposed elevation onto Edward Street, which will comprise of the brick detail to the front, adjacent Great James's Street, and render finish to the rest of the elevation. Again, the design is simple and contemporary and allows supervision of the Edward Street. Members, this just is a streetscape which shows the proposed building set within the context of adjacent buildings on Great James's Street. As stated in the report, there is a variety of design and materials at this location, and officers consider the contemporary design sits well in the overall streetscape. And this again is a floor plan. This floor plan shows the layout of the tourist suites, and it shows the internal stairs and circulation, and each suite is self-contained. The plan also shows a proposed light well within the building, and that is on the boundary adjacent with Great James's Street. So the relevant planning policies under which the application has been assessed are listed in this slide, and they include the Derry Area Plan, the SPPS, PPS 3, PPS 6, PPS 16, PPS 15, and a design guide for the Clarendon Street Conservation Area, as this site is located in the conservation area. So during the processing of the application, the following statutory consultees were consulted, and a summary of the responses are given on the slide. So DFI Rivers have no objection from a drainage or flood risk perspective. Historic Environment Division have assessed the application and does not consider that it affects the setting of the listed building, and the listed building is opposite the site on the other side of Great James's Street. NI Water Management Unit has considered the impacts of the proposal on the surface water environment, and on the basis of the information provided is content with the proposal subject to informatives. NIA Land, Soil and Air Regulation Unit have no objections to the development and has provided conditions and informative to be placed in any planning decision if approved. NI Water has stated that there is available capacity in the receiving wastewater treatment facility to serve the proposal. There are existing public stormwater and sewage pipes to also serve the proposal, and standard informatives have been provided. DFI Roads has no objections to the proposals with conditions and informatives to be included in any planning approval. DFI Roads have also advised that the proposed development is located within the commercial core and as such parking provision is not required. And Environmental Health is content with the development subject to conditions and informatives. So during the processing of the application, a total of 11 representations were received. The issues raised were impact on traffic and parking on Patrick Street, which is to the rear of the site, especially in relation to a recently approved apartment building, which is under construction in Patrick Street, and this application will exacerbate parking provision in the area. It may give rise to an increase in antisocial behaviour in the area. Regarding number 6 Great James Street, which is the adjacent building, the development will cause an invasion of privacy and will block light into the apartments. The proposal will affect the health of the existing residents at number 6 due to the blocking of natural light and potential increase in noise levels. So officers have considered all representations received, and we conclude that the site is within the central area and commercial core of the city and in Zone A in terms of parking provision. So policy TR5 of the area plan advises that only operational parking is required for sites located in the commercial core. There are several surface level and multi-storey car parks within walking distance of the site. The application does not provide for in-curtilage or additional car parking spaces dedicated for the use. But officers are content that given its location, this is acceptable. Amended plans were received during the process of the application, and they incorporate a light well into the development. The dimensions will mirror those of the adjacent building, which also contains a light well where windows from the adjacent apartments look into the light well, and therefore creates a combined light well for number 6 Great James Street and the new development. The agent has also submitted a light report, and this has been carried out by professionals in their field, which demonstrates that the development will meet British standards in terms of light provision for the proposed tourist suites and the adjacent apartments at number 6. In terms of noise, there has been no demonstrable evidence submitted that the development will cause noise disturbance. Officers do accept that there will be some noise and disturbance during construction. However, this will be temporary, and officers don't consider that there will be any undue noise from the development when complete, and any antisocial behaviour, that's not evidence that that will be caused by this development, and if it does happen in the future, it will be a policing matter. So the conclusion and recommendation from officers is that the proposal is considered acceptable and that it is in accordance with the area plan and other material considerations. There is provision of infrastructure works in accordance with PPS 3, sewage and land drainage in accordance with PPS 15, protection of archaeology and built heritage in accordance with PPS 6, compliance with tourism policies found in PPS 16, and all of which are supported through the SPPS for Northern Ireland. Other material considerations have also been taken into account, including representations made, submitted reports, and the advice from consultees, and overall they justify an approval of the application. It is therefore recommended that the Planning Committee approve the planning application subject to the conditions as set out in the planning report. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Andre. We have 2 speakers on behalf of the applicant. Sean and Brendan, can I remind you have 5 minutes between the 2 of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Myself and Brendan at this moment in time will only need to speak if the council have any questions or anything they need us to answer. So we're happy to come back on anything, but we've nothing further to add than Andre. Thanks, members.
Okay, any questions, members, for the applicant? Go ahead there, Alderman.
Thank you, and can I say that it seems like a very worthwhile development, given the emphasis that this council would have going forward in tourism. I note that the 22 units and aimed at I presume, the walking and cycling market. That does not, of course, preclude car use of those who would use the facility. Is there any consideration given to car parking within the overall application? Thank you.
If I could come on there through the chair. The answer is no, but we have arrangements with quayside car park for I suppose good parking rates, accessible 24 hours a day. You know, it's immediately across the street, plus all the general town centre parks, which are normally empty at night time when we have tourists. That's with the development of the Holiday Inn. And, you know, there is a piece of that people want a bit more space potentially with families, and where people do, and we're actually working up on a cycling and walking scheme that we're trying to promote to try and get people in this part of the world. So they need a bit more amenity than we currently have within the Holiday Inn Express. So the parking is available, and we haven't had any issues since we opened, whilst we have had 18 months or so of COVID. But it's a thing for every city centre, and I think it has to be managed. You know, my preference is that people use public transport and then, you know, multi-stories, but they do use cars considerably, there's no question. So in terms of that, that's what the position is. Mr. Dobbins, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. It's surrounded by pubs and clubs, and can I ask what provision that you have made for perhaps sound barriering? You just mentioned that it would be ideal for families, and whilst yes, I do agree that a family might like an apartment, you know, for short term while they're staying here, but I wouldn't be taking it in that area when there's so many pubs and clubs around it. Can I just ask what provision has been made for possible soundproofing?
Well, again, next door in Holiday Inn, we'll be closer to that. We have no issue. We've really built the most up-to-date housing building standards, and we've also improved the window for soundproofing, which we would intend to do here as well. But there is no issue in terms of sound, and in terms of, you know, anybody with antisocial behaviour who would stay there, they would obviously impact other guests, and then we would obviously have a management system in place, which we do. So this will be managed within the Holiday Inn. So, you know, those are all the same management positions. We're not going to have somebody making noise internally, because it would affect the other guests and would have to leave. And the same thing from outside. There's not really much activity up on that side. I don't think it would, and there would be, I suppose, in the Strand Road, but we currently have no issues, and these will be built to a very, very high standard.
Okay, anyone else for questions for the applicant? Okay, can I have a proposal from the floor, please? Oh, my apologies, questions to the officers. Questions to the officer? Sorry, Eileen, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. If there's no questions to officer, I would like to propose that we take the officer's recommendation to approve the planning application. I think that bringing more tourism to the city centre particularly is a welcome application. I do think when we're talking about the signs and taking into consideration the things that objectors have said, and I know that, you know, any antisocial stuff may be a policing matter, but if we can limit the noise during construction, if there's conditions on that with times of construction, or is that a standard condition anyways? If it's not, I propose it be within the conditions of the proposal.
Yeah, through the chair, I can just confirm there for Councillor Mellon, there are conditions. They're outlined there on page 210 of members' packs. So there's a condition on the construction activity shall be restricted 2 hours between 8 and 6 Monday to Friday, and 8 to 1 on a Saturday, and at no time on a Sunday, if members are content with that condition. There is also further conditions there with regards to glazing to I suppose respect the the internal amenity and the noise levels, which is something Councillor Dobbins alluded to there. So there are conditions that we have put on any planning approval that will help for that noise generation and the construction hours.
Councillor Boyd, will you second then that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to recognise the fact that there are a significant number of conditions placed on this particular development. And again, just to second the proposal from Councillor Millen. Again, just to agree with Alderman Hussey as well, you know, this is evidently all part of how we want to develop the economy in the city, and obviously the tourism economy is something that we've as a council identified as a key player going forward. In relation to the parking, and obviously any development in the city centre usually runs up against parking concerns, but the nature of city centres are that there always will be challenges in relation to parking. So Mr. Dudley's given us some degree of a comfort with that because they have an arrangement with a nearby parking provider just across the street. Not only that, but I'm sure all of us who know the city well enough know that the William Street car park is also only matter of 100 yards away, maybe less, you know. So just to support the recommendation and to second the proposal from Councillor Millen. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, members, so the proposal is to accept the officer's recommendation. Can we have a all for? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, move on to item 6, which is LA 011 2020 06090, and Laura's going to take us through that.
Good afternoon, members. Item 6 on the agenda is an application for a 1.5-storey infill dwelling with detached garage, and the site is between 27 and 31 Loughan Road in Donamana, and the recommendation is to refuse. The planning reference number for this application is LA11 2020 0609, and it's an outline application. So this slide just shows the site location plan and the overall aerial photo for the site. As you can see, it's an irregular shaped plot located on the western side of Loughan Road. It's in the lower part of a larger agricultural field, and it's located in the countryside east of the village of Donamana. A post and wire fence define the northern and southern site boundaries. The western boundary is undefined, and the roadside boundary to the east is defined by an existing watercourse and a belt of mature trees. The application site is not openly visible when travelling along Loughan Road towards the site in either direction, and there is an existing laneway there you can see providing access to the site. So this slide just outlines the policy context under which this application was assessed, including the Regional Development Strategy, the Strabane Area Plan, the SPPS, PPS 3, PPS 21, PPS 2 and PPS 15. This slide just shows some images of the site. The one on the right hand side is just from the entrance to the existing dwelling there, and the other one on the left hand side is just from the entrance to the application site, the proposed entrance. Again, this slide just shows some views of the application site from the roadside. It just shows that there's like a dense boundary vegetation there along that, which obscures views of the site and provides a degree of enclosure. So this is an indicative site layout as provided by the agent on behalf of the applicant. It just shows a proposed siting of the dwelling there on the western half of the site, the proposed access point and its position with within the current countryside. So under policy CTY8 is the main policy for assessing this proposal as it's claimed to be a gap site. So policy CTY8 defines these sites as those which are sufficient to accommodate up to a maximum of 2 houses within an otherwise substantial and continuously built up frontage, which is defined as a line of 3 or more buildings along a road frontage. The site is a parcel of land adjacent to an existing residential dwelling at number 31. To the north of the site, there's an existing access lane which serves number 27 Loughlin Road. This dwelling is set back approximately 180 metres from the public road to the northwest of the site. The proposed site is not considered to be located within a substantial and continuously built up frontage, as there is only one dwelling and garage that are visible along the road, and this is number 31. Therefore, this is only a row of 2 buildings. Number 27 and the associated buildings are not clearly visible from the road due to its considerable setback, the topography of the land, and existing vegetation along the road frontage of the site, which screens views of it. As number 27 does not have a frontage onto the road and is not visible when travelling along a section of road, it's not considered to form part of the continuous and built up frontage. As such, the application site is not considered to be a gap site within a substantial and built up frontage as required by the policy, and therefore the proposal is contrary to policy CTY8. Though the proposal is not considered to be acceptable in principle, we still assess it under the other policies of PPS 21, and that includes policy CTY 13. Sorry. So in terms of integration and design, as I said, it's an outline application. Therefore, no specific details have been provided. The site's relatively flat and the land rises beyond it to the west. It has the benefit of the mature vegetation along the road frontage, and it's considered that these features would provide a degree of integration, and therefore we consider that a dwelling would visually integrate in accordance with CTY 13. In terms of amenity, the SPPS provides a policy context. So the indicative layout demonstrates that there's sufficient separation distance between the proposed dwelling and any adjoining development, and that sufficient amenity space can be provided. So therefore, there will be no impact on amenity other than during construction. In terms of site access and parking, PPS 3 provides a context. DFI roads have been consulted and have no objection. They provided standard conditions. Therefore, the proposal complies with PPS 3 in that respect. There's also sufficient space within the site for parking and manoeuvring of vehicles. In terms of natural heritage, the site is hydrologically linked to the River Foyle and tributary SAC. A biodiversity checklist was provided. Both NAD and SAS were consulted, and they had no objections to the proposal, subject to conditions. Therefore, it's considered that the proposal complies with PPS 2. PPS 15 is also a consideration due to a part of the site lying within the 100 fluvial floodplain, and there's also an area of surface water flooding. The indicative site plan demonstrates that the development can be located outside of this, and no culverting is required. Therefore, we're content that the proposal complies with PPS 15. There have been no objections either received to this planning application. So overall, in principle, it's considered that this proposal doesn't comply with policy CTY8 or CTY 14 of PPS 21. And that the proposed dwelling would create a ribbon of development, which results in a suburban style build-up of development, which is detrimental to the rural character of the area, and therefore refusal is recommended for the reasons set out in the report and on the slide here in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Laura. We have someone speaking on behalf of the agent, Ali Alford. If you'd like to come in, Ali.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to jump straight in here to the concerns that are raised and the reasons for refusal. I think broadly speaking, as Laura has outlined there, the main issues really are the footage and the criteria under CTY 8, and the application is generally acceptable for all the under all the other policies. So from the case officer's report, the main issue that they have with this application appears to be that the planning department feel that dwelling at number 27 Loughlin Road sits too far behind the proposed site to provide a continuous built-up frontage onto Loughlin Road. This is supported by photos included within the report. We do not feel that these photos provide an accurate reflection of the frontage, as the existing dwelling at number 27 Loughlin Road is clearly visible from the roadside. We have previously submitted supporting statements showing the view of the site from our proposed shared access, and we forwarded these again yesterday in advance of this meeting. It clearly shows number 27 and 31 Loughlin Road and their associated garages, providing a built-up frontage of 4 buildings with our proposed site sitting between. Our photo is taken from the exact same position as the case officers in figure 3. However, it is actually taken towards our site and not looking back down the road towards number 31, meaning neither our site or the dwelling at number 27 is visible. It is a similar case for the photo taken from the entrance at number 31. If you were to rotate approximately 45 degrees from that point and take that photo again from the same location, number 31, number 27, and their associated garages and our site would all be visible. On the issue of number 27 being set back too far, we have also previously included examples of applications approved by Derry City and Strabane District Council for infill dwellings, where one or more of the buildings and the frontage was set back from the proposed site. And we also included a summary of these applications. So LA11 2018-0614, the adjacent building or site was set back approximately 80 metres from the approved site. LA11 2018-0741, adjacent building or site set back approximately 44 metres. LA11 2018-1142, the adjacent building or site was set back approximately 40 metres. Number 27 Loughlin Road, which the case officer determines to be set back too far to provide a continuous built-up frontage, is approximately 42 metres from the rear of our site, which is in line with applications which have been previously approved by Derry City and Strabane District Council. In summary then, the proposed site forms part of a small holding of land owned by the applicant and his family, which includes the dwellings of number 27 and 31 Loughlin Road. It is the intention of the applicant to build a house for himself to live in, and he has no intention of selling the site off for development purposes. There have been no objections from the owners of the adjacent dwellings against this application. Despite concerns raised by the case officer, we believe that we have met the criteria as laid out in PPS 21 criteria 8 for an infill dwelling, and that the supporting evidence provided as part of our application and within this statement show that. I therefore hope that members of the committee will issue a recommendation to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you for that, sir. Any Alderman Kerrigan?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. To be fair, the agent there seems to have touched on a couple of points. I was going to ask the question in regards to the applicant and their reasoning for coming into this, but I'll raise a couple of points and you can respond. You're stating that this is a family connection here, that this applicant is seeking to build this site on this site, and that these are family members in number 27 and number 31. And is this, I'm assuming, then a family farm or something to that extent at some stage? Further to that, you have raised the issue again in regards to number 27, sorry, that is further back off the road, not just with the same road frontage, but you have referenced there's 3 applications there with, are there three with further distances, or are there 2 maybe with further distances? You're stating that as your site is at 42 metres, you stated, and there was one there as LA11 2018-0741, which is 44 metres, I think. Is that the reference you'd give there? And I know that section reasonably well. It might be out of my area, but I have a fella that I'd went to school with on that area there lives in Loughan Road, and I would have thought that, to be fair, as you're travelling along from Liscloon side, that you can see 27. There's a slight bend in the road there, and you are able to see 27 and 31. Admittedly, as well, when you're coming up from the Gordaclair crossroads. In my view there, I'm just seeking if that would be your view on it, that there is, although there's substantial hedging and trees at the roadside, once you get up closer to number 31, your 27 is very visible there, so you can see it coming from the south, from the Gordaclair crossroads as well. So just confirming those couple of things, Chair. Thank you.
You'd like to answer that, please, Ali?
Yes. So with regards to the family, it's a small holding of land that they own, and then I think it's an aunt and an uncle then that live in both of the houses, an aunt on one side and an uncle on the other. It's not actually farmed at the minute, but some of the ground is leased out, so they have no farm number. Otherwise, we may have the potential to apply for housing the farm there. So it was determined that an infill dwelling was their best option. But I mean, yes, it is family owned. The family owned houses either side, and it's a member of the family then, the nephew, who's looking to build a house here. Certainly no intention of selling it off, otherwise I don't think you'd have the blessing of the family to be building a house here. On the point with regards to the distances, yes, the examples that we've provided, there was 3 examples that we provided where adjacent buildings or dwellings were set back from the approval site. So ours is approximately 42 metres. The others which we had sourced in our research were at 40 metres, 44 metres and 80 metres. So 2 of those were in excess of the distance between the back of our site and the back of number 27. With regards to number 27 actually being visible by the roadside, I can't quite understand how that's really up for debate. I mean, we have submitted 2 photos now that clearly show number 27, and if you travel along Loughan Road, it's clearly visible. The photos have been taken from points and at angles that don't show it, but at any other point, or if you just rotate the camera slightly when you're taking a photo, it is clearly visible. So I'm not quite understanding the point there on that one, to be honest.
Okay, Alderman Carrick, I'll answer your question. Can we take a proposal from, sorry, Alderman Hussey, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the proposed refusal reasons, and I think it's fair to say that number 1 has been answered. I mean, to turn around and say no overriding reasons when we've just heard it's a family connection. This is a rural family, and a rural person wishing to live in the rural area, unless it's the intention of this council via this planning committee to herd everybody into the rural, out of the rural area and into the towns dead on. But there is an overriding reason. There's a family connection. The issue of urban development, and I noted in the officer's presentation that the Strabane area plan is the LDP at the moment, and it was stated that Strabane area plan had no infill policy. Well, I'm sorry, but I sat on Strabane District Council since 1989, and we had planning applications, and we had infill applications. So I don't see why, we're being told that the SAP does not have an infill policy. It may not have had a policy, but it had previous infill applications that were dealt with. So, to use that as a rationale to say this is not infill is totally wrong. All of the consultee responses, I don't see anything actually against. Maybe I'm wrong. And I see no objections. I'm flummoxed by the officer's final recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Laura, could you come back in and answer those questions, please?
Chair, maybe I could come in, Laura, or Laura, do you want?
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah. Chair, I'll just come in and clarify those points. Well, in relation to Councillor Hussey's query on the first refusal reason, obviously PPS 21 gives you a list of situations whereby houses in the countryside are acceptable within relevant policies. And in this case here, officers have determined, look, it doesn't meet the exception within CTY 8. Therefore, we've recommended refusal, and consequently we would have to use CTY 1. So that's the rationale for that reason. In terms of the second reason for refusal, in terms of infill policy, the previous policy consideration prior to PPS 21 was the rural strategy. So Strabane Area Plan does not contain a specific infill policy per se, whereas the rural strategy was used many times, and Councillor Hussey is quite correct in that. But the policy context, what we're looking at now in this one is PPS 21, or what that officers are looking at. So that's the reason behind the officer's recommendation. And we are aware of members' views on this policy. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Suzanne. I have Alderman Kerrigan wishing to come in again.
Chair, if there's no other questions, I would be minded to make a proposal unless someone else wants to raise a question.
Alderman.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, Alderman Kerrigan. Just a simple question for Laura. If I may, the agent referred to the photographs that were submitted. Is it possible for us to have sight of those photographs? Would that be possible to upload them? Or would it be even useful for us to see those?
Through the Chair, those are available on the planning portal, but actually I have one of the photos here that was submitted yesterday again with the supporting information. I can put that on for you if you wanted to view it.
Yes, please.
Yeah. That's the photo there.
Any more questions to the officer? Can we have a proposal from the floor, please?
Chair.
Can I just query? I didn't get that late information on my pack.
Oh, I haven't seen a photograph either myself.
Chair,
Okay.
it's
Sorry, as far as I'm concerned, that wasn't late information. It was information that was submitted during the application. It just was that the agent is indicating that his own photographs weren't used, but we don't necessarily use other people's photos. I think that's the point.
Sorry, Maura, if I clarify through the Chair, the agent had submitted speaking notes as they do now in case there's any technical issues, and this photograph came along with them, so we didn't consider it to be a late item because it was already submitted during the processing of the planning application and was available to view on the planning portal.
Thank you for that. Okay, back to the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. Chair, there are three reasons for refusal, and I'm going to have to go against the officer's recommendation and seek for approval for this site. First reason is the SPPS CTY1 of PPS 21, and no overriding reason why the application should be there. I'd refer to the Strabane Area Plan 123.2.1, the rural remainder policy, and I would be minded that that would deal with that issue. I will skip to the third reason, CTY 14 of PPS 21, the creation of urban development and a suburban style build-up. I would be minded, Chair, that you know, there is, as I say, I know that Loughans Road, I know the way it's situated there, and if you're going further down the Loughans Road, where the crossroads of the Gorda Clare Road, there is a build-up, but it would be more agricultural wise. Now, if you're coming on down onto the Loughans Road, onto the Lisnara Road, there is a potential that there's a section there potentially could be designated as a ribbon there. But in regards to that section there between number 27 and 31, I would be minded that it does not cause a suburban style build-up. It fits in with the remainder of the Loughlin Road, particularly heading towards Liscloon to the north. In regards to CTY 8, the second refusal reason in there, the ribbon development, I would be minded that you can see from the picture, and I would have been minded from my own knowledge of it, that there is visually linked. Yes, there's a lot of foliage on the road, there's a lot of trees there, mature hedge in there, but I would still be minded that there is a visual link between number 27 and number 31 and the buildings, the dwelling houses and garages that are there. So I would be minded that there is enough of a frontage there of dwellings and buildings that it does sit that this is a gap site. I've been minded again is referencing as I know it's only outline, but it's referencing as a story and a half, and I would be minded that that it is that side of scale is suitable for that area. There's bungalows, there's two-story houses on the road, so I would be minded that the scale, the siting, and the plot size are appropriate for the dwellings that are on Loughlin Road. So again, I would be minded, Chair, for those reasons to reject the officer's recommendation and to propose that we grant permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman.
Chair,
Can we have a seconder, please?
Intent to second that, mindful, of course, that it is an outline application. As far as I know, isn't it? Yeah. Heard to second.
So the proposal to the floor is to reject the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? What's that? Unanimous, okay. Thank you, members. That's unanimous decision. Thank you. Okay, members, we're going to move on to item 7, LA 1120. Where was second? Okay, so I will move on to item 9, which is LA 112018 0693F, and Suzanne is going to take us through that.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. I'll just this on. Okay, so item 9, members, is the erection for the proposed erection of a 3-story end of terrace dwelling house on lands adjacent to West End Park, 22 West End Park in Derry. And the recommendation is to approve. So this first overhead shows the location map of the site. You can see here the site at the end of West End Park. And this is just a satellite overhead showing you the site and again. This is the policy context, members, that's listed in your report. And we have the regional policy, the Derry Area Plan, the SPPS, the suite of PPSs that are relevant, and the supplementary planning guidance. This is a detailed layout of the proposal. It is a full application. You can see the footprint of the building, and you can see the existing units, the existing terrace at West End Park. And here we have the proposed tracking around the edge of the building, and this is the end terrace of Celia's Walk. In terms of the proposed plans, you will have probably seen through the report, it is a 3-story terrace with a rear return. It is for a 3-bedroomed property for use as a single dwelling house. Downstairs we have a study, utility, shower, kitchen, living rooms, first floor, bedroom, bathroom, and then 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor and a shower room. So in terms of the characteristics of the site and the area, you will be aware West End Park is an established residential area. 7 of the properties are listed. The numbers 1 to 7, the remaining properties aren't. And there are issues here in terms of access and parking and traffic movement. And you'll be aware that there've been 16 objections have been received in the plan application. As part of that assessment, we have looked at the details of the analysis of movement within and around the site. Various objections have raised issues in terms of safety and emergency vehicles, and I'll come to those in a wee minute. In terms of views of the site, again, those are just photos taken some time ago. You can see this is the site here, and then there's existing, I suppose, entry to take a moving around the rear of the property. So just going over the letters of objection, there were issues in terms of land ownership, loss of parking, road safety, issues, concerns regarding the plans that have been submitted, and loss of open space area for kids to play on, overdevelopment, right of way being blocked, the character of the area being impacted on, and the need for the housing was being queried. Loss of privacy due to vegetation being removed in the boundary with Celia's Walk, noise during the construction, and then some sort of concerns regarding and points of information regarding the statement that the agent had put in. In terms of consultee responses, just to advise, NI Water had no objections. DFI Roads did advise that there were 3 parking spaces are required for a single dwelling at this location. They did accept that the tracking details, both for the emergency vehicles and the cars that I put up earlier, were acceptable, and did provide a true reflection of what could be achieved on the ground. Environmental health were consulted only because of the objections in terms of residential amenity, but they raised no concerns and provided standard advice in terms of noise insulating techniques. So in terms of the policy context, officers have considered that, you know, we feel it does meet PPS 7, and obviously there's a history to this site, and that back in 1999, there was a proposal originally recommended for refusal by the former DOE on the grounds of this turning head area at the top of West End Park. That the property would obstruct with that. The PAC actually approved the application at the time. They didn't, they advised the department didn't sustain that reason for refusal. Subsequently then, we did have an application for 4 terrace dwellings, which was refused, and a further application in 2008 for a 3-story dwelling, again, which was approved. The policy context hasn't changed, the site hasn't changed. So we're looking at the same policy in terms of, firstly in terms of PPS 7, it is for a single dwelling. End of terrace is slightly narrower than the existing properties along the terrace, but we feel it's still within the character. There's no issues in terms of, there is a small garden provided out the back, but the amenity space provision is similar to that within the established terrace. No issues in terms of the impact on the 7 listed buildings, and obviously there's no requirement to provide open space. No issues in terms of overlooking, loss of light or overshadowing, and obviously local neighbourhood facilities wouldn't be required. In terms of parking, no in-curtilage parking is required. The only is proposed. The only parking available would be on-street parking. And that has obviously been an issue for many of the objectors. As I say, there were 16 objections on it. The site does lie within Zone C. It's outside the central area and it's outside the designated flat zone, but it is in a very highly accessible location. And both the Development Control Advice Note and the PPS 3 do allow flexibility in terms of car parking and the provision of parking in highly accessible locations, and officers consider that this would be a highly accessible location. So we feel it's one of those cases whereby, you know, it's a vacant plot, urban area, and it's one of those cases where we could apply the reduced parking to it, given it is for a single dwelling. In terms of the other policies, obviously there's an additional policy in the addendum of PPS 7 in terms of density and the pattern of developments. We feel it meets that. And again, policy H3 of the dairy area plan, which is for like infill housing in urban areas, whereby if the character of the area is being maintained and there's no other reason why the site would be retained for another use, and that's the case in this site. And again, in terms of BE1, the general design policy, it does respect the design of the surrounding area. Other issues, no natural heritage issues or utilities issues and flooding issues. The drainage will be subject to the normal discharge consents required for a development of this size. So members, on balance, authors would recommend refusal. We've considered the letters of objection in detail. We have also received information from the agent, and we are happy to take any questions, and approval is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Suzanne. We have an objector wishing to speak, Mr. Justin Hood. Justin, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I am an owner-occupier of number 22, which directly adjoins the planning site under consideration. I have been a resident of Weston Park for 6 years and regularly consult with neighbors, and I can confidently state that my views are in line with theirs. I understand that a lot of effort has gone into the Planning Committee report for this application. However, I would like to take this opportunity to point out that the report relies on factual errors and omissions that, when corrected, should result in a change in the recommendation for approval. My first point is the resident's claim of right-of-way. The report does not mention that objections included the fact that residents have collectively sought an injunction against the applicant in county court for their interference with the right-of-way by placing concrete bollards at the site, preventing residents from parking there. A civil bill was filed in county court in late 2019 and is still pending with delays incurred due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the untimely passing of one of the defendants. According to nidirect.gov.uk, local councils, quote, have a specific duty to assert, protect, and keep open any public right-of-way, end quote. Residents believe they have enough evidence to prove in a court of law that they have acquired the right-of-way. If a court were to agree that the right-of-way has been acquired by prescription, it would preclude development of this site. Therefore, it would be prudent for any recommendation to be deferred until the issue can be adjudicated. My second point is the issue with the reduction of parking amenities. The planning report relies on the applicant's claim that the site is not used for parking. This is not true. The planning site has been in continuous use for parking, turning, and vehicle access for more than 40 years. This can be supported by evidence which the residents intend to present in court. This site can accommodate 3 parking spaces, and erecting a dwelling at this location will result in the loss of existing parking for residents. This needs to be said again. This application requires the removal of existing parking from the local area. Serious parking issues in the local area should be well known because the DFI Roads response to this application states, quote, there is scarce capacity in the street and surrounding area, end quote. In addition, a parking survey for Weston Park was presented to a Planning Appeals Commission hearing in December 2020, demonstrating that cars are forced to park in a manner that represent a danger to drivers and prevent normal access to the street. This leads to my final point with vehicle access and safety. The planning report relies on a vehicle movement plan provided by the applicant to demonstrate that vehicles can safely navigate the site. However, the movement plan is fundamentally flawed. The applicant's diagram does not include cars parked on the street. My objection letter included an updated diagram with parked cars and demonstrate how vehicle access becomes impossible. This was confirmed in the real world in March of this year when a resident required urgent medical attention and an ambulance was called to the street. While being transported to hospital, the ambulance attempted to navigate around the existing bollards and parked cars. Unable to make clearance, the ambulance was forced to turn around, costing vital time maneuvering and requiring a paramedic to exit the vehicle to help guide the ambulance around the bollards, concrete wall, and fence. A car is typically parked at the site where the ambulance turned, and had a car been parked at that site, the ambulance would have been unable to maneuver out of the street completely. CCTV video of the incident is available upon request and has already been shared with an MLA to assist with resolving the issue. I'm prepared to answer further questions and share documentation of the facts previously mentioned. Considering these facts, I ask that the planning recommendation be changed on the ground of vehicle access, or at least deferred until the parking issue and parking access issue is clarified and guidance is provided by the court on the resident's right-of-way claim. Thank you.
Thank you for that, sir. Any members got questions for the objector? Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, Chair. Hello, Justin. Justin, just the one question, and forgive me, but the sound quality at this end wasn't great, so I was kind of struggling a little bit to hear some of what you said. So I just want to get some clarity. I think you mentioned that there was an existing traffic survey carried out by somebody, but I couldn't hear who. Can you perhaps give us some degree of clarity around what traffic survey was carried out and what the findings of that particular survey were, if indeed you possess that information, because that's not information that we have in front of us.
Yes, yes, this was a parking survey that was prepared by myself in preparation for a Planning Appeals Commission regarding parking issues for another planning application related to West End Park. So basically the parking survey provided evidence that the street is overfilled with parking. There are 24 parking spaces along the road, plus the extra 3 parking spaces on this site. The parking survey demonstrates that that there are a number of cars that park in the Muse lane and also block the ability for vehicles to actually turn along the site from the street onto the Muse lane.
John, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Boyle.
Thanks for that, Justin. Just again, to be clear, then who carried out the actual traffic survey?
I did.
Was it carried out by experts in the field of traffic surveys, I think is what I'm trying to find out.
No, it was not. It was done by myself.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I'll come back to officers in relation to that matter as well. Just to say, I know the street very well. I'm from that local neighbourhood, so I know the area very well. So thanks for that for now, Chair.
Members, any more questions for the objector? Justin? Okay, we now have Lee Kennedy. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Kelly.
Sorry, Chair. Just one question really is, I'm not clear because it did mention that it was a parking space, and I think he also mentioned it was also a right of way, and I was just wondering which is it?
It is a right of way for parking. So the residents assert that a right of way has been acquired by prescription through its continuous use of parking for more than 40 years on the site.
Okay, Councillor Kelly, yeah? Okay, right, okay. All right, can we have Lee Kennedy, please, on behalf of the agent? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I'm here today to support the decision of council officers to approve this planning application on behalf of the appellants. The planning history to this application is key to its approval here today, as it established the principle of development. The site was initially refused planning permission by the former DOE in 1998. It was appealed to the Planning Appeals Commission and permission was granted in March 1999 for a dwelling on the site. Therefore, it has an established principle of development. Furthermore, a full planning application was granted in 2008, agreeing the design, materials and layout similar to that of the adjacent properties. The current application is a renewal of the 2008 permission. There's been no change to the development site, only minor design issues to the proposed house type. The planning history of the site in planning terms carries considerable weight. I'm unaware of any change to planning policy or legislation which would now deem the application site unacceptable in planning terms. The assessment of the planning officer in 2008 and this current planning application concludes that the application site meets current planning policy and therefore should be approved. I understand objectors' concerns in terms of parking and road safety, but I don't feel these concerns are justified as a direct or indirect result of this planning application. We all wish to park outside our front door, but this is not always feasible, especially when living within an inner city, high density residential area with only on-street car parking such as West End Park. Residents advise that there is a lack of car parking in this street, which may be the case, but I visited the site this morning. There was 8 free car parking spaces. Yesterday morning, there was 6 free car parking spaces. Last Thursday morning, there was 8, and Friday morning, there was 7. These car parking spaces were available and can be used by this development or anyone else for that matter. There's no restriction in terms of usage along the street. I would advise members that the 99 approval is a committed development site on the landscape, and anyone who purchased a property since this date would have been made very aware of the planning history of the site through the property searches which would have been carried out by their solicitors. Furthermore, the relevant authorities, when assessing any other planning application in West End Park since March 1999, legally needed to take account of this committed development site when assessing the car parking capacity of the street. Residents have raised concerns that the securing of this site has removed car parking from the area and a restricted right of way. West End Park residents informally operate a one-way system, enter at the front, navigate around the site and exit out the rear onto the new road. The applicants wish to advise they have never permitted parking of any vehicles on this site and wish to confirm that over the years they have taken a number of measures to secure the site. Comments have been made indicating that this site has caused an obstruction to an emergency vehicle entering and exiting the street. This is totally untrue. The emergency vehicle could not leave the street due to a third-party vehicle obstructing the rear laneway, forcing the emergency vehicle to make a 3-point turn. This incident happened outside of the application site, and any vehicle performing a 3-point turn would find it difficult due to the restrictive widths of the road, hence the operation of a one-way system by residents. I would advise members that the construction of this dwelling house will enhance the character of the area by replacing a visual eyesore of a development site, and it will also increase the road safety by increasing the right-of-way width from 3.2 metres to 4.1 metres. And following concerns from the residents, our traffic engineers has provided the drawing demonstrating the movement of both a fire engine and a private car navigating around the site in forward gear without any restrictions whatsoever. We thank you for your time and I welcome any questions.
Any questions to the agent? Sorry, Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, Chair. Hey, Lee. Lee, just a one question. It's back to that same matter that I raised with the objector who just spoke. Did you or the applicant or anybody carry out a recent traffic survey in this street or indeed in the locale around it? And I say recent.
Under this application, John, we haven't carried out any recent car parking survey. We haven't been requested to provide one by the road service or the planning department, so we didn't feel that it was necessary.
Okay, Lee, that's grand, thanks.
Any further questions to the agent? Any questions to the officer? Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Just one. There was raised by the objector some contentious legal matters, third party. That has no bearing on this application and the decision today. That would be my understanding.
Thank you, through the chair, Councillor Gallagher. Yeah, I mean, all applicants as part of an application are required to provide a certificate of ownership. And we are content that the certificate of ownership on this case is correct. We've received no other evidence to change our position on that. We note that there is a legal issue going on outside of the planning process regarding part of the land, but it's a separate matter that can be dealt with. This application does not have to be held pending the outcome of any legal matter that's taken in relation to the right of way or whatever's in dispute.
Thank you, Suzanne. Councillor Kelly, do you still wish to ask a legal question to her?
No, that answers my question. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Boyle.
Thanks. Suzanne, again, just the same question to yourself. I suppose is the council planning department currently in receipt of or possess a recent traffic survey that would have been something that we could have considered?
Okay, Councillor Boyle, I'll clear up this issue. You will recall, in terms of this application, no, we have not requested a traffic survey because we feel, obviously it's for one dwelling, and we feel that there is enough scope within the policy to allow the parking provision at the development at this site. It will not detrimentally impact on it. However, you will recall two previous applications that came to committee for number 19 West End Park that are currently with the Planned Appeals Commission, and one of those was for the retention of apartments and the other one was for the change of use to an HMO. And on those applications there, I'm aware that the agent did submit parking surveys, but those were on the basis of those applications, so that's not something that we would use as part of this determination. This is for a single dwelling. This is not for multiple units of housing. So it's essentially, whilst the parking issue is somewhat the same, but at that time, obviously, those matters went to the PAC, and I'm aware that that is what the objector is referring to today.
Councillor Gallagher, just come on.
There's nobody else, Chair. I'm happy to propose.
Sorry, could you just wait, please?
I thought it was finished.
Hey, Councillor Boyle.
Okay, Suzanne, so just again for clarity, for the benefit of us all, we are currently in a situation where there's two applications sitting with the PAC with no decision made on them, one for a HMO and one for a set of apartments. Is that where they are sitting at the minute? No decision made on those?
Yes, through the chair, those are with the PAC. The appeals, the evidence has been heard and exchanged, and we're awaiting those decisions. We've been waiting those decisions for quite some time now, and we but irrespective of that, we have to obviously determine what we have in front of us. And I would point out that this is an application for a single dwelling, whereas those applications are for multiple units of housing.
Are you happy with that, John? Okay. Councillor McGuire.
Chair, could I just ask Suzanne where this type of house sits within the previous conversation around amenity space? Is it obviously wouldn't have the same amenity space, but is it because of it's in an area of listed buildings or in that there, does it not have to meet the same requirements? Because it is a 3-story dwelling, it's not HMO or nothing like that there. And the other, is this, obviously planners has took a professional opinion on this, but in my view it would be that this is overdevelopment of that area. I mean, it's like something you would see in possibly London or somewhere, where you would just try and squeeze a house into the smallest of gaps. But that's what it looks like to me, Chair, and that's a comment.
Okay. Through the chair, just in terms of amenity space, yes, in inner urban areas on very restricted sites, you will have less of a requirement for the provision. So it's not a standard. We're not looking for 70 square meters on a site like this. We have, obviously, they have put a small garden area out the back. And I suppose in more central urban locations, you will have access to other amenity facilities within the urban areas, and that is the broad thinking behind that. In terms of overdevelopment, yes, your point is well made on that, and obviously some of the objectors are concerned with that too. I think one of the determinant issues here is obviously the planning history on this site. But we do have it's quite a narrow building. It does have 3 bedrooms. There is an acceptable level of accommodation provided inside. The rooms are all an acceptable size. So there's no issue in terms of this is a small unit that's been shoehorned in as such. There are obviously restrictions in terms of the end property, but the sizes have been, stepped out now through 3 planning applications. And DFI Roads are content that tracking that I put up earlier, I can put up again if you want to see it, showing the vehicle and the car, that can move satisfactorily around the site, and they accept that drawing that the agent had referred to.
Any other questions to the officer? Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for Suzanne for that. And I know the West End Park, there's been applications in relation to West End Park that have come before this committee quite a few times. There's been quite a lot of discussion. And one of the things that we've always agreed on is that West End Park is unique in its setting, and it's unique in its access arrangements in terms of the constraints that are placed there. And I know there's been quite a lot of discussion around the appropriateness of the access arrangements that exist within West End Park. But what we've heard today is that not only under the current arrangements, and due to current parking pressures, it's led to obstructions of emergency vehicles, which could impact the residents that are living, existing residents, and any potential future residents that are living along West End Park. I know in the past we've heard around concerns around bin collections and access from council vehicles. The concerns around access arrangements in West End Park are well rehearsed. The parking pressures in West End Park are well rehearsed. We don't need, I completely understand where Councillor Boyd's coming from, but we don't need a professional parking expert to tell us that West End Park's at capacity. So that's there already is tremendous pressures on the current residents and arrangements at West End Park, and I feel that this application, despite previous PAC decisions, will exacerbate those parking pressures. So I would be very uncomfortable with the recommendation that's in front of us. Thank you, Chair.
You, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Boyle, you want to come in?
No, just to say, and you're right, Councillor Jackson, I do agree, Chair. I don't need a professional survey carried out, but I think one of those would be very handy and very useful for us to have. But I do know Councillor Jackson's quite correct. The level of difficulty in parking and access at West End Park has been something that has been going on for decades, probably since the invention of the motor car, I would imagine. And the other thing to remember here is that the PAC granted permission, and I think of what Lee Kennedy was saying, 1999, which was 22 years ago. And things may well have significantly changed in that 22 years. In fact, again, I don't need to be an expert to know that they have. So there are very considerable concerns around access, parking and movement that I don't think we've been provided. I don't think we've been given sufficient information in relation to that. That's one of my biggest concerns. And on top of that, I also agree with Councillor McGuire. It seems like a contrived overdevelopment of a gap site in this particular case. So those are just some of my views, not to mention, on top of all of that, the difficulties and the challenges that are faced already for access for emergency vehicles in particular. Again, if you actually look at the photographs, in fact, one of the photographs provided to us by officers, figure 5, shows you the level of parking on the street. I don't know when the photograph was taken, but I can assure members who've never been on that street perhaps, but that's what it looks like all the time. There's generally very, very little opportunity to park a vehicle. So there are very real concerns for local residents, I think. And I think it's something that we as a committee need to bear in mind. And the last thing I'd want in my conscience would be that somebody might lose their life as a result, for example, of not being able to gain access to an ambulance, or even worse still, a fire engine can't access a street like this. It is quite unique in that regard.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boyd, for those very valid points. Councillor Gallagher.
Chair, I'm not sitting in there. Everyone's finished speaking. I would go ahead and make the proposal that we go with the officer's recommendation.
We don't appear to have a seconder, Councillor Gallagher, that will fall. Anyone else with a proposal? Councillor Boyd.
Thanks, Chair. Well, evidently, as Councillor Gallagher didn't receive a seconder, and I appreciate that he feels the way he feels about it, but obviously there needs to be a counter proposal to that. I'm actually proposing that we don't accept the officer recommendation in front of us for now, certainly, on the basis of traffic, movement and parking, and actually, in truth, because we have, in my view, insufficient information for us to consider. A lot of the information that may be put in front of us or have been put in front of us today seems a little bit out of date, to say the least.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbin. Go ahead, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Just following that proposal, just to bear in mind the committee that the precedent has already been set for the site. This current application is very similar to one that has already been passed by council in 2008, I think it was. So I think they should bear that in mind. It's based on the same policies.
You thought, Councillor Gallagher, go and ask Maura to come in and speak on that, please.
Sorry, through the chair. Mr. Boyle, did you also have another reason you listed previously in regard to development, or I'm just picking up words that people are making here. It's just important that we highlight that in terms of the reasons.
Well, again, the reason there that I did state earlier was overdevelopment of the site. Chair.
Okay, we'll go ahead with a vote for that. All in favour of the proposal not to accept the officer's recommendation?
I have to abstain because I wasn't here for part of the application.
Okay, those again. Two. Any abstentions? 2 abstentions, yeah. Okay, so proposal not to accept officer's recommendation passes with 9-4, 2 against and 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Chair, can I just clarify, just for my own information, the refusal reason then? So we've got traffic and movement concerns, lack of parking, and overdevelopment. Is that clear? Yeah.
That's correct, Suzanne, yeah. Apologies, members, I can't count a round of fingers. I need to take my socks off. All right, it's 9-4, 1 against and 2 abstentions. Yeah, the plan is we'll run to 6:30 and then we'll knock it on the head from there and reconvene tomorrow. Okay. Okay, the next item is item 7, LA 11-2021-0513F, and that's going to be taken through by Malachi.
Good afternoon, members. This is item 7, LA 11-2021-0513F. Is an application for addition of a 3.6 metre high catch nets above approved 2.4 high padded fence, getting to a total height of 6 metres. The addition of 2 metre high catch nets above approved 6 metre ball stop fence, taking to a total height of 8 metres. And the extension of existing 6 metre ball stop fence for additional 1 metres, and is located at the former Clondermott High School, Irish Street, and the recommendation is to approve. The following slide shows the location of the application. You're probably familiar with the previous approval in 2017 for the new shared sporting facility at the former Clondermott site, providing a number of leisure facilities, including outdoor pitches, tennis courts, and a new community hub. The application, this is an amendment to the previous approved application, so the areas of site concerned are shown in the hatched red area, and on the right hand side just an overview site of the current state of the site, but you're probably aware that construction's already started on the actual approval from 2017. So in terms of the application, it's a limited amendment to the previous approval to 3 or 4 small areas within the application site. And in particular, it's with regards to additions of ball stop fences associated with the sports pitches to stop balls, etc., going to nearby residential areas or leaving the playing areas. So you'll see on the attached overhead block plan, areas in red. These are new proposed 6 metre ball fence stops. So these are the ones where the cursor's at here. The minute will be going at this area and this area at the end of the 3G soccer pitch. And the areas in blue is the addition of ball catches over an existing 2.4 metre high padded fence, and that's in relation to the blue areas as shown in the attached plan, and the remaining one is a small extension to an existing approved ball catch area that's down at the bottom corner of this multi-use grass pitch. So the policy context pretty similar to the original approval, SPPS, the Dairy Area Plan, and Open Space and Urban Design. Given the nature of the application, there was no requirement to go to any statutory consultees. It's really assessment for officers to make in terms of the visual impact or the impact of the proposal on any amenity of nearby properties. So in summary, as I say, the purpose is to prevent stray balls. Whilst they're tall structures, they comprise mesh nets, catch nets, which will not cause any loss of light or detrimental impact upon residential amenity. There already is ball catch facilities approved in the existing development. These are additions to those, and the proposal will not cause any demonstrable harm to the neighbouring land uses. And therefore, there's opinion of officers that it's compliant with all aspects of the SPPS. And it's important that no objections have been received on the foot of 60 neighbour notifications. So all in all, we think that the application meets planning policy, and it's before you today because it's an application by Derry City and Strabane Council. So the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Malik. I have a question there from Councillor Jackson.
Chair, I don't have a question. I'm just coming on because I'm working on the assumption that this is a straightforward application. There's no policy concerns. So I don't have a question as such. I was coming on to and speed things up and make a proposal.
Okay, go ahead, make a proposal.
It's a welcome addition. An already approved application, so with no policy concerns, I'm happy to propose that we accept the recommendation.
Mr. Gallagher, your second, yeah. Okay, I vote on it. So it's 2 abstainers, 2 left to come back. Okay, we'll just use unanimous then. Yeah, okay, thank you. I think there's a point going into the next one.
Yeah,
I
Chair,
would,
I was going to make a suggestion, because see if we deal with the next application, it means that we can resume tomorrow virtually. It's my understanding that we can't conduct a virtual meeting if there's an application live, but if we're only dealing with the matters for information.
2 items for decision.
Yeah,
It's not just for information.
but
On the
we
papers.
can still take those under the delegated authority. They can take those. All our committees can take place virtually.
enough. Are you withdrawing your, yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Okay, right, members, I think we'll reconvene here again tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Anybody, any other ideas? Okay. Okay, thank you very much for that. Cheers, Nick.